City of Rockaway Beach Planning Commission meeting is now hereby called to order. Stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And our roll call, Commissioner Pat Olson. Here. Commissioner Xander Olmutz. I didn't hear you, but I think you said yes. Here. Xandra here?
Here.
There
Yes.
she is. Okay. Sandra Johnson.
Here.
Commissioner Jordan Cedric.
Here.
Commissioner Still Chester.
Here.
And Commissioner Nancy Lanyon.
Here.
Present. And we don't have our city councilor or the mayor with us tonight, or Mary, so they're not with us. And so on for approval of the minutes. Has everybody had a chance to take a look at the minutes from last meeting? Any corrections or comments?
Part of it, there were a few corrections that were put before you this evening, so request that you please consider a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
I will make a motion to amend, or to approve as amended.
And second?
I'll second.
And moved and seconded to approve the minutes as modified. Do we all in favor say aye?
Aye.
And opposed? It carries unanimously. We don't have any presentations scheduled, so we'll move directly to our staff reports.
All right, I'll keep it short this evening since we've got a lot to go over. In May, we approved 2 new single-family dwelling units, and we did 2 garage conversions to ADUs. Tomorrow will be the Anchor Street Playground ribbon cutting ceremony that'll be taking place at noon. And staff have been working extensively with our consultants and ODOT on the Salmonberry Trail project. That's moving forward, but at a slow pace. Hopefully we'll have some updates for you soon. What I can tell you about the project is our consultants will be here for the picnic that's taking place on the 27th from 11 to 3 at Phyllis Baker Park. And then they'll also be setting up a table at the 4th of July celebration. Their goal of that is to engage with the public, get some feedback on the project. They'll also be sharing a survey that people can fill out in person or online. And our website's been updated with where that project is at. And that's all I have for today.
Great. Very sweet. All righty, we have a public hearing here. The first one is CU number 24-1, a consideration of an application for conditional use at 137 South Beacon Street, which is Tillamook County Assessor's Map 3N1032CC, lot number 6300 for a single family dwelling in the C1 commercial zone. Hereby open the public hearing for considering the conditional use application. My name is Bill Hassel, and I'm the chair of the Planning Commission for the City of Rockaway Beach, Oregon. Members of the Planning Commission are appointed by the Rockaway Beach City Council and serve as volunteers. Our role is to conduct public hearings and to make decisions about land use matters in the City of Rockaway Beach. In making these decisions, we must apply the law of Rockaway Beach and cannot vary from or change that law. If you think the law should be changed, you can work with the city to do that, but state law provides that applications must be judged based on the law that existed when the application was filed. It is the Planning Commission's duty to be fair, impartial, and preserve due process for all participating in this hearing. We'll start the hearing by asking staff to summarize its written report. Then the applicant and those in favor of the application can testify. Then witnesses who oppose the application or have questions or concerns can testify. If there is opposition or questions, the applicant can respond to them. Planning commissioners may also ask questions of the staff and the witnesses throughout the hearing until the record closes. And we will close the public portion of the hearing, and the planning commission will determine about what to do with the application. During deliberations, the planning commission may reopen the public portion of the hearing if necessary to receive additional evidence before making a decision. Any person with an interest in today's agenda may offer relevant oral or written testimony or both. But please speak only when I identify you for that purpose. You must testify orally or in writing before the close of the public record to preserve your right to appeal a decision to the City Council or to the Land Use Board of Appeals, also known as LUBA. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes an appeal to the board based on that issue. For the applicant, failure to raise constitutional or other issues related to the proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the city to respond to the issue precludes an action for damage in circuit court. Any participant may request the planning commission hold the record open or continue the hearing to provide opportunity to present additional evidence, arguments, or testimony regarding the application. You must make that request before we close the public portion of the hearing. If the planning commission holds the record open, you can submit additional written testimony and evidence into the record before the commission makes a decision. If the planning commission continues the hearing, it means oral and written testimony, including new evidence, can be offered at a future hearing. Regardless of whether the hearing is continued or the record is held open for any reason, state law provides that we must hold open the record for at least 7 days after it is closed to all parties, so to allow the applicant to submit final written arguments in support of the application, unless the applicant waives that right. We also must comply with state law that requires the city to make a final decision, including all appeals, within 120 days after the city staff found the application was complete, unless the applicant waives that right. We'll note about testifying. If you are testifying, please state your name and mailing address. If you wish to be notified of a continuance, appeal, or other action on this application, please print your name and complete the mailing address on the form on the table outside of the meeting room. If you refuse to provide your address, we may be unable to provide you with a copy of the final decision. Please make sure that your testimony is related to the applicable criteria or other criteria that you believe apply to this application. Planning staff will identify those criteria at the beginning of the hearing. Testimony also should not be repetitious. Please do not repeat testimony offered by yourself or earlier witnesses. If we think that your testimony is irrelevant or repetitious, I may interrupt and ask you to continue with another subject. A 3-minute time limit on participants has been imposed. Demonstrations from the audience are prohibited. Please refrain from them. Comments from the audience will not be part of the record. The applicants are Shannon and Alex Smith. Property is located at 137 South Beacon Street, Rockaway Beach, and is further identified on Tillamook County Assessor's Map number 2N1032C. I believe it's lot 6300. The hearing will be on application requesting approval for conditional use of 137 South Beacon Street. The applicants own the property on South Beacon Street, which is zone C1 commercial. The applicants seek to demolish the current residential structure and construct a new 2-story home on the property for residential use. The Rockaway Beach zoning ordinance requires single-family units to be permitted conditionally in the C1 zone. Members of the Planning Commission are to be unbiased. If any member of the Planning Commission has a personal bias or conflict of interest, such as family, financial, or business relationship with any of the applicants or with regard to the land in question, they shall declare it now. Are there any commissioner declarations of bias or conflict of interest? See none. Does any member of the audience wish to challenge a commissioner on the basis of bias? Hearing no objection, if any member of the Planning Commission has ex parte contact since this application was filed on May 22nd, 2024, including site visits, they should report it and share their observations now. Are there any commissioner declarations of ex parte contacts, including site visits?
Site visit. Site visit.
That's a site visit. Okay.
Site visit.
Wow. Okay. And let's see. So can I ask the planning staff to present your report?
Thank you. Screen here. And sure, already explained, we are looking at conditional use application 2401. The applicants are Shannon and Alex Smith, and the location is 137 South Beacon. This evening we'll be going over the staff report, which includes property information, the applicant's request, some images and maps, the public comment that's been received, the criteria for granting a variance, the findings, as well as planning commission action. The lot size is approximately 2,500 square feet. The zoning designation is C1. The surrounding land is, the subject property is surrounded by commercial space, the former bank to the north, and residential properties to the east, west, and south. There's a single-story residential building on the property, which the applicants have been issued an approval to demolish. The property is located in the AE flood zone, which is the only building constraint for the property. The applicants are requesting conditional use approval for the construction of a new two-story residence on the property. The subject property is in the C1 commercial zone, which allows single-family dwellings as a conditional use. All of the other developed properties located on this block south of South Beacon Street contain single-family dwelling units for residential use. With the exception of the property directly to the north of the subject property, which is the former U.S. Bank. That property is commercial and is accessible for both Highway 101 and South Beacon. This is a map of the property, giving you an idea where it is relative to the city. And we'll zoom in a little bit. There you can see its relation to the bank, which has the parking to the north. This is a site plan of the proposed home. There you can see the property lines as well as the existing structure that has been issued a demo permit. And the proposed home would go in that same direction. We received no public comments for this application. Right, to authorization to grant or deny conditional use. Conditional uses listed in this ordinance may be permitted, enlarged, or otherwise altered upon authorization by the Planning Commission in accordance with the standards and procedures set forth in section 6.010 through sections 6.030. In the case of existing prior uses to the effective date of this ordinance and classified in this ordinance as a conditional use, any change in use or lot area or alteration of the structure shall conform with the requirements dealing with the conditional uses. Before conditional use is approved, findings will be made that they will use or comply with the following. That the proposed use is consistent with the policies of the comprehensive plan. The location, size, design, and operating characteristics of the proposed use are such that the development will have minimal impact on surrounding properties. The standard is not applicable to multifamily dwellings, manufactured dwelling subdivisions, and manufactured dwelling parks. The use will not generate excessive traffic when compared with the traffic generated by the uses permitted outright, and adjacent streets have the capacity to accommodate the traffic generated. Public facilities and services are adequate to accommodate the proposed use. The site's physical characteristics in terms of topography and soil is appropriate for the intended use, and the site is adequate to accommodate the proposed use. The site layout has been designed to provide appropriate access points, on-site drives, parking areas, loading areas, storage facilities, setbacks, buffers, utilities, and other facilities which are required by city ordinances or desired by the applicant. When it comes to the comprehensive plan, staff found that the property is surrounded by residential properties to the east, west, and southern sides. To the north, there is commercial property, the former U.S. Bank, which has entrances from Highway 101 and South Beacons. The allowance of another single-family dwelling on South Beacon would be consistent with other developed properties on the street and would have minimal impact on the surrounding properties. Oh, excuse me. That is in regards to the location, design, size, and characteristics. When it comes to the comprehensive plan outlines the need for additional residential housing. Additionally, the comprehensive plan encourages local residents to develop small-scale home occupations. While the applicants do not have current plans to use the property commercially, they are designing a home to fit the requirements of our commercial zone by constructing the home so that the first story is a minimum of 12 feet in height to accommodate a future potential commercial use. When it comes to excessive traffic being generated, staff find that the property has historically been used as a residential property. It is not anticipated that additional traffic will be generated by allowing the applicants to rebuild another single-family structure. Public facilities and services. Staff find that the property is currently serviced by city water and sewer services. The site's physical characteristics. Staff find that the topography and soils of the subject site are appropriate for a single-family dwelling. When it comes to the site's ability to accommodate the proposed use, staff find that, as noted previously, the property has long been used as a residence. The applicants seek to demolish the current residence and construct a new two-story residence in the same footprint as the current building. The site has already been equipped with appropriate access, parking, and utilities. Staff find that the applicants have met each of the criteria for granting additional use requests. And our next step is Planning Commission action. If, after hearing the evidence at the hearing, the Planning Commission agrees that sufficient facts exist to grant conditional use, they should direct staff to write findings based on the evidence to permit the conditional use. If they do not find that sufficient evidence exists to allow the conditional use, they should direct staff to write findings for the denial of the application.
Good. So the commission will now ask questions of staff regarding the application.
So, just to clarify, on this slide, oh, feel silly, but I see two rectangles. Can you explain those? I know one is.
Oh, so you see a house and then a surrounding deck is what the larger rectangle is around that property.
Oh.
Man, my observation was there are two dwelling units and one garage or shed. There are three buildings on the property, is my observation.
That is the property directly to the south. So it's possible that when you did your site visit, the home had already been demolished. We did issue demolition permits for the current structure. So there's likely a vacant lot between the bank and the lot that has the home, the garage, and the shed.
Not as of today.
Yeah, it's still there.
Still there. Yeah.
There is only one structure though.
Okay, go ahead.
So any issues? I tried to, for the shed, I did not go on the property. So I see a shed on its boundary seems to be on two properties.
They are very narrow lots. The neighboring property does have a shed, a detached garage, and a single family dwelling. It may appear that that shed is on there. On my site visit and conversations with the applicant, the only existing structure was the dwelling unit.
Okay, so the shed proposed on here is not there.
No longer. Yes.
Okay.
Sandra?
Is there parking requirements for this? Are there parking requirements regardless of it being in a commercial zone?
Yes. So irregardless of it being in a commercial zone, your residential parking requirements, 2 parking spaces per dwelling unit.
And this lot is sufficient to have 2 off-street parking?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have in my notes, questions regarding our comprehensive plan, and I may respectfully disagree. Will I have an opportunity after we hear? We think, will I have an opportunity at the end when we vote to say, or should it be now? Now? Okay. Thank you. All right, I'm sorry, I'm still getting used to this. Okay, so I went through our comprehensive plan, and among those things that are listed, it says between 2007 and 27 is what that involved. We're going to need in Rockaway Beach 160 new dwelling units, 24 gross buildable residential acres. We have 162. 96% of Rockaway Beach's acreage is available land zone residential. Here's my point. Commercial shortfalls are 5 acres. On page 8 of part of this, it's about 4 acres. But in any case, we need residential, it states in several places, redesignated to commercial in order to accommodate our potential business growth. Okay. And it's east of 101. And I don't find per specifications in this commercial zone, which the property is, even though it's acting as a residential, that there is specificity to change from commercial to residential. The top floor and above need to be residential, but no more than 50% of the ground floor to be commercial space. I don't see any commercial request for space in the new dwelling, which is right in the heart of our commercial district. I have 2 parts. I don't want to be boring and note them, but I'm trying to do my due diligence that I don't see, again, with respect, that this qualifies as changing a commercial to residential. And I'm not going to look at past that there are residents there. I'm going to look at the future, present and future, as to what Rockaway Beach is going to do to encourage their commercial district. That's it. Thanks. It's not me. Can I?
We're hearing music feedback from your line.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I am out of state and I am at the nearest Wi-Fi and I am at Starbucks, so I apologize. So I'll just pick this up and step outside real quick. It is a lovely 104 degrees. It's nice and cool today. So, in clarification, in response to her comment, can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm just clarifying because those are my concerns too. But what I did see in the application is that they are building the lower floor to the 12-foot specification, which is required for a commercial zone for the business portion, right?
Yes, that's correct.
So they are building with the intent that if it is sold, it still has the ability to be used as commercial. Is that right?
They may choose to use it as a commercial space in the future.
Okay. And then for business purposes, the off-street parking is sufficient. Is that correct?
It would depend, for commercial uses, it depends on what the use is, the commercial requirement. So they're not located directly off Highway 1. They do need to provide parking, depending on what the use was.
So with the ordinances in mind and keeping in protection of our comprehensive plan for business growth, if they're building to maintain that, where would the parking be?
So
are they providing?
Yeah, so the parking would be in the front of the building. If they wanted to do, say, a shop where they sold goods, they would only need to provide a parking space based on the likely size of the structure, which would be one for an employee and then one for a customer. But if they're to do a sit-down restaurant, the parking really explodes, more than likely, regardless of they were seeking a conditional use or not. They would need a parking variance in order to meet our parking requirements.
Okay. Those were my questions. Thank you so much.
Questions? Sure.
Point of clarification. Is anyone currently residing in the residence?
No, their plans are to demolish the current structure, so there's no one living in it currently. I'm not sure if it's come down yet. We did issue demo permits for it several weeks ago.
Okay. And I do see in the application that it's for future residency, again, in the future. I didn't see anything about business. I see it's being built to commercial standards. I just don't see anything in regard to use of property reflecting that.
I believe the applicants were intending on using it as a weekend residence. And then when they relocate down here, potentially use the lower portion that is commercial space to have a small shop for the applicant.
Didn't see that.
So that's just from my conversations. It was not in the application.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, Sarah.
So if it's currently an existing one-story home, they want to do commercial, so they are going to be 2 stories. And C1, so does that mean that their height is going to be the 45 feet because it's commercial?
They would have the ability to, but they'd be far under that with just a 2-story structure like that.
But we know that they won't be 45 feet or they will be 45 feet. We don't know that.
No, we don't. Just like any other commercial structure, you would not need any sort of variance to be able to build to the height maximum. That could be set in your approval if you wanted to keep it under a certain height. You can always condition your approval if that's a concern.
Any other comments, questions? Okay. Has planning staff received any correspondence on this application?
No.
For the applicant's presentation, are the applicants present? Would they like to present any additional information on the application? If so, stand at the podium and present your name and address for the record.
I'm here representing them, but
Okay.
Ryan, obviously.
The public testimony in support of the application. We'll now receive public testimony, beginning with those who wish to speak in favor of this proposal. I have a sign-up sheet for those who have requested to speak. Anyone joining us remotely who wishes to provide comment in support of the application can notify the city recorder by clicking the raise hand icon now, and we will add you to the sign-up sheet. Do we have any remote guests requesting?
We do not.
Okay. We will now receive public testimony for those wishing to speak in opposition to this proposal. Anyone joining us remotely who wishes to provide comment in the opposition to the application can notify the city recorder by clicking the raise hand icon now, and we will add you to the sign-up sheet. Do we have any remote guests?
Yes.
No. And anyone in the audience that wishes to oppose this application? This paper. If I get it. There it is. Public testimony that is neutral to the application or have any questions about the application will receive public testimony from those who wish to speak that are neutral or have questions about this proposal. Anyone joining us remotely can provide comment that is neutral or has application questions on the application and notify the city recorder by clicking the raised hand icon, and otherwise request to add the sign-up sheet. And do we have any remote? No. With the
Sorry, I just wanted to confirm that there were none in person that wanted to testify in support.
Yeah, I might have skipped that. Is anyone present that wants to testify in favor? And would the applicants like to make any rebuttal statements, including regarding these statements, since we've had no statements? Commission will now ask questions of the applicant's staff or the public regarding the application. Do the commission members want to ask any questions? That's it. Any final comments from the staff?
My only other comments would be in regards to the comprehensive plan. And while I appreciate Commissioner Lanian's comments on commercial property, when I read our comprehensive plan, I have a different interpretation of how that portion of our comprehensive plan talks to restoring commercial property. And I look to that as being the commercial property that mainly abuts Highway 101. And that property, we have a lot of commercial property directly off Highway 1 that has been given commercial use or residential use. That property is highly valued for commercial space and is being used residentially. While I appreciate the desire to retain commercial space, I don't think you're going to get much traffic, at least in the current standards, from South Beacon.
Understood. May I?
Nancy.
Thank you. The intent in the comprehensive plan is to promote and reassign, that was my interpretation, residential to commercial. I know it's not on 101, but it's about as close as you can get, and that was my interpretation.
Okay. Any questions, comments? So unless waived by the applicants, the city shall allow the applicants at least 7 days to submit final written arguments, but no new evidence, facts, documents, or testimony in support of the application. Would the applicants submit additional written arguments within the next 7 days, or do you waive that right?
You have an option on behalf of the applicants to do that. So if you want to submit any additional written arguments, specifically speaking to the comprehensive plan or other items that were discussed tonight, you're welcome to do so on behalf of the applicants.
You want to retain the right to additional?
Retain the right.
Okay. So I'll now accept a motion to close the record and the public hearing, or motion to continue the public hearing at a specific date and time, at least 7 days from today. Or motion to close the public hearing and keep the record open for 7 days of additional written arguments. Any motion?
I'll make a motion. I move that we close the public hearing and keep the record open for 7 days.
And second?
Second.
Second. Okay. Any comments? Questions? Okay. We can vote on the motion. Stephanie?
Could we have some discussion
Oh, sure.
regarding that motion? It doesn't sound like anyone, was particularly concerned about providing information regarding this hearing, or, that there's a lot of one way or the other. I question whether there's a need to keep the record open. It seems like it's a situation where we can make a decision this evening and have a final decision for the applicants without the need to keep the record open.
But they reserved the right to submit information within 7 days, which is why I made that motion that way.
I misunderstood.
Yeah, no, I understand. I agree with you otherwise. But since they kept the right, I thought it's only fair that we leave the public comment open.
Understood. Okay, so that's the situation then.
Yeah.
Just he's reserving his right to continue to speak. Thank you.
Okay.
So can we clarify the motion? It was.
Yeah. Let's restate the motion.
Oh, sure. I should have been more clear with the date anyways. I move that we close the public hearing and keep the record open until June 27th, 2024 for additional written arguments.
It's been seconded. Roll call vote. Commissioner Pat Olson. Yes. Commissioner Xander Olmos.
Yes.
Yes.
Commissioner Georgiana Zedrick.
Yes.
Commissioner Stephanie Winchester.
Yes.
Nancy Lanyon.
Yes.
And I vote yes. Carried unanimously. And any additional questions for the witnesses or the applicant? We'll reopen the public hearing and provide an opportunity for rebuttal if new questions emerge.
At this point, we should, board. That's, close the hearing.
Okay. So we have a motion to either close the record and the public hearing, or
We voted on that.
did we?
Yes, so we can.
Oh, okay.
You'll continue your deliberation and discussion, at the date,
June 27th.
Yeah.
June 27th.
June 27th, okay. Okay. So we'll keep the record open and we'll close the class. Okay. For consideration of PB 24-1, consideration of an application from Nadana Development LLC for a modification to the planning unit development that was approved by the city in 2008 for the property identified on Tillamook County Assessors Map as 2N 1020 AB, tax lots 10200, 10400, and 10500. Now open the public hearing on that application. Hearing is now open for the purpose of considering plan unit development application number 24-01. My name is Bill Hassel and I am the chair of the Planning Commission for the City of Rockaway Beach, Oregon. Members of the Planning Commission are appointed by the Rockaway Beach City Council and serve as volunteers. Our role is to conduct public hearings and to make decisions about land use matters in the City of Rockaway Beach. In making those decisions, we must apply the law of Rockaway Beach and cannot vary from or change that law. If you think the law should be changed, you can work with the city to do that, but state law provides that applications must be judged based on the law that existed when the application was filed. It is the Planning Commission's duty to be fair, impartial, and preserve due process for all participating in this hearing. We'll start this hearing by asking staff to summarize its written report. Then the applicant and those in favor of the application can testify. Then witnesses who oppose the application and who have questions or concerns can testify. If there is opposition or questions, the applicant can respond to them. Planning commissions and commissioners may also ask questions of the staff and the witnesses throughout the hearing until the record closes. Then we will close the public hearing and the Planning Commission will deliberate what to do with the application. During deliberations, the Planning Commission may reopen the public portion of the hearing if necessary to receive additional evidence before making a decision. Any person with an interest in today's agenda may offer relevant oral or written testimony or both. But please speak only when I identify you for that purpose. You must testify orally or in writing before the close of the public record. Preserve your right to appeal the decision to the City Council or to the Land Use Board of Appeals, known as LUBA. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford decision maker and parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes an appeal to the board based on that issue. For the applicant, failure to raise constitutional or other issues related to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the city to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in the circuit court. Any participant may request the planning commission to hold the record open or continue the hearing to provide an opportunity to present additional evidence, arguments, or testimony concerning the application. You must make that request before we close the public portion of the hearing. The planning commission holds open the record. You could submit additional written testimony and evidence into the record before the commission makes a decision. If the planning commission continues the hearing, it means that oral and written testimony, including new evidence, can be offered at a future hearing. Regardless of whether the hearing is continued or the record is held open for any other reason, state law provides that we must hold open the record for at least 7 days after it is closed to all the other parties to allow the applicant to submit final written arguments in support of an application unless the applicant waives that right. We also must comply with state law, which requires a city to make a final decision, including appeals, within 120 days after the city staff found the application was complete, unless an applicant waives that right. If you are testifying, please state your name and mailing address. If you wish to be notified of a continuance, appeal, or other action on this application, please print your name and complete mailing address on the form on the table outside the meeting room. If you refuse to provide your address, we may be unable to provide you with a copy of the final decision. Please make sure your testimony is related to the applicable criteria or other criteria that you believe applies to this application. Planning staff will identify those criteria at the beginning of the hearing. Testimony also should not be repetitious. Please do not repeat testimony offered by yourself or earlier witnesses. If we think your testimony is irrelevant or repetitious, I may interrupt and ask you to continue with another subject. A 3-minute time limit on participants has been imposed. Demonstrations from the audience are prohibited. Please refrain from them. Comments from the audience will not be part of the record. The applicant is Nadana Development LLC, and agent for the applicant is Dean Alterman. The property is located on Kittiwake Drive, north of Riley Street and south of Song Street in Nadana Beach. The property is identified as a Tillamook County Assessor's Map 2N1020AB, lots 10200, 10400, and 10500. The hearing will be on an application requesting modification to the Nadana Wave Planned Unit Development that was approved by the City of Rockaway Beach in 2008. The applicant seeks the following modifications to Phase 2 of the 2008 approval. First is to develop Phase 2 in 2 subphases instead of 1 phase. Second is to create 2 lots instead of 1 lot at the north end of Jackson Street, identified as Lot 24 on the 2008 approved plan, identified as lots 21 and 22 on the plans submitted with the application. And the third is to create 4 lots instead of 3 lots at the northeast corner of Kittiwake Drive and Riley Street, identified as lots 14, 15, and 16 on the 2008 approved plan, and identified as lots 13, 14, 15, and 16 on the plan submitted with the application. And fourth, to provide when the owner of the land to the south extends Jackson Street south into that property, the city will vacate the east stub of Riley Street so that Riley Street will terminate in a T intersection with Jackson Street. And the vacated stub can be combined with tract E to form an additional building lot. Members of the Planning Commission are to be unbiased. If any member of the Planning Commission has personal bias, conflict of interest, such as family, financial, or business relationship with any of the applicants or with regard to the land in question, they shall declare it now. Are there any commission declarations of bias or conflict of interest? Not here.
I just wanted to make a statement that I don't have any bias, financial or otherwise, but I do wanted to acknowledge that I am a resident of Nadana.
Thank you. We didn't hear.
She lives in Nadana. She lives on Nadana.
Yes. That's her residence. If any member of the Planning Commission has had ex parte contacts since this application was filed on March 26th, 2024, including site visits. They shall report it now and share their observations. Were there any commissioners declaring ex parte conflicts, including site visits? Yes, Sandra? Georgiana?
So I did a site visit, and on this particular day, yesterday, June 19th, I, along with my husband, made a site visit to phase 1 and the area for this application. I met Christine McDonald, who is the wetland consultant for DSL, and botanist Kurt Pekaroth. They were working near the undeveloped Jackson Street. They showed me an area of their studies and findings. I also met Anna Song. She asked if I had any questions. I replied, I do not at this time, and if I do, I'll ask them at the public hearing.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
I have been in that area since the application was submitted, but not since I've seen the application.
Okay. Yeah.
I also have done a site visit, but I did not speak to anyone or see anyone while I was in the area.
Okay. Okay. So planning staff, you can please present your report.
Sorry, it's not going to be quite as quick as last time. All right, so as Chair Hassel has already shared, we're discussing the Donna Wade Community Development Phase 2. All right, so why are we here? In 2008, the Rockaway Beach City Council approved the Donna Wade Plan Unit Development and PUD, a 28-lot phase development. The applicant is now seeking to make modifications to the previously approved PUD and is seeking tentative plan approval for these modifications. The city's role is to ensure that both public and private development are aligned with the standards set out in the city's guiding documents, such as the comprehensive plan, zoning ordinance, and subdivision ordinance. The city provides a forum for public hearings and guidance to property owners to ensure compliance with city standards. The City of Rockaway Beach Planning Commission plays the role of the state-required committee for citizen involvement. As a committee, they're tasked with monitoring and encouraging public participation in planning. This committee conducts constitutional and legislative public hearings on certain land use applications, such as this. As a decision-making body, the Planning Commission must base its review and decisions of the criteria established within the city's ordinances. They may not ignore applicable criteria or make decisions based on factors or arguments not related to the applicable criteria. This is case file PUD 24-1. The applicant is Nadana Development, LLC, care of Anna Song, and the agent for the applicant is Dean Alterman. The subject property is located on Key Lake Drive, north of Riley Street, and south of Song Street in Nadana Beach. The property is identified as Tillamook County Assessor's Map 2N 1020 AB, tax lots 10200, 10400, 10500. The lot size is approximately, 2 and a bit, sorry, I'm not sure why that cut off on me, acres. It's in my formal staff report that you have though. Yeah. The surrounding land use, or the zoning designation is R1, which is the single family residential zone, and SA, which is the special area wetland zone. The surrounding land is adjacent to the north is the existing Nadana Wade Plan Unit Development Phase 1. To the east is undeveloped private land zone R1 and Highway 101. To the south is undeveloped private land zone R1 and special area wetland. To the west is the White Dove Estates neighborhood, which is also zoned R1. To the existing structures, there are none except for utilities installed by the applicant during the construction of Phase 1 for Phase 2. The following utilities are proposed to serve the subject property: sewer and water by the City of Rockaway Beach and electricity by Tillamook PUD. Development constraints. The property contains wetlands that were delineated by professional wetland consultants prior to the 2008 approval. As wetlands are not stagnant, according to the Department of State Lands, which we'll refer to commonly as DSL throughout this application, the former delineation is no longer valid and expired after a period of 5 years. At the time of the 2008 approval, the applicant provided a joint permit from Department of State Lands and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. These permits have now expired and will need to be renewed before any disturbance or impacts to the wetlands takes place. If the request is approved, the applicants will be required to obtain and provide copies of necessary permits from these agencies prior to initiating construction. In addition, a portion of the subject property is located within the 100-year floodplain as identified on the flood insurance rate map, panel number 4105C0218F. The applicant is requesting a modification to the Nadona Way Plan Unit Development that was approved by the City of Rockaway Beach in 2008. The applicant seeks to make the following modification to Phase 2 of the 2008 approval. One is to develop Phase 2 in 2 subphases instead of 1. 2, to create 2 lots instead of 1 lot at the north end of Jackson Street, which is identified as lot 24 on the 2008 approved plans, and identified as lots 21 and 22 on the plan submitted with the application. 3 is to create 4 lots instead of 3 at the northeast corner of Kittiwake Drive and Riley Street, identified as lots 14, 15, and 16 on the 2008 approved plan, and identified as lots 13, 14, 15, and 16 on the plan submitted with the application. 4 is to provide that when the owner of the land to the south extends Jackson Street south to that property, the city will vacate the east stub of Riley Street so that Riley will terminate on a T intersection with Jackson, and the vacated stub can be combined with tract E to form an additional lot. So some background on this application. In 2008, the applicant submitted Plan Unit Development Application PUD 719 for the creation of a Phase 28 lot development with a PUD overlay. In addition to the PUD approval, the applicant was also granted variances, allowing for some of the homes within the PUD to be constructed over the height maximum for this area and to allow for the development to be constructed without sidewalks. Section 10.060 of the Rockaway Beach zoning ordinance requires the applicant to file a quote, final plan for the entire development, or when submission in stages has been authorized for the first unit of the PUD, within the first year after the city approves a preliminary development plan. The code does not set a time limit on when the applicant must apply for subsequent units or stages of the PUD. In this case, the city approved the preliminary development plan in early 2008. The applicant applied for and received final approval for the first unit of the PUD within 1 year after it received final approval of the preliminary plan. The applicant recorded the Nadona Way Phase 1 on February 2nd, 2009 as Plat C573, Tillamook County Plat Records. The plat included dedications of Kittiwake Drive, Song Street, Duke Street, Riley Street, and Jackson Street. In addition to the 8-number lot, the plat included common areas of tracts A, B, and D, and areas for future potential development as tract C, E, F, and G. The applicant suspended the project during the recession before the Nadona development was ready to build Phase 2, though it had constructed many of the public improvements for Phase 2 in accordance with the plan that the city engineer approved in July 2008. The applicant is now ready to plat Phase 2. The applicant is requesting to modify the approved plan to plat Phase 2 in 2 separate pieces. Phase 2 would consist of the 11 lots east of Kittiwake Drive, numbered 9 through 19, and would be taken from what is now tract F. Phase 3 would be the line of 9 lots to the west of Kittiwake, numbered 20 through 28. The numbered location of the lots would conform with the final plat approval that the city issued in 2008. The applicant, as we've covered, is requesting 3 modifications to the PUD approval as the part of the Phase 2 request. To create 2 lots instead of 1 at the north end of Jackson Street, identified as lot 24 on the 2008 approved plan, and identified as lots 21 through 22 on the plan submitted with the application. To create 4 lots instead of 3 at the northeast corner of Kittiwake Drive and Riley Street, identified as lots 14, 15, and 16 on the 2008 approved plan, and identified as lots 13, 14, and 15 and 16 on the plan submitted with the application. And to provide that when the owner of the land to the south extends Jackson Street south into that property, the city will vacate the east of O'Reilly so that O'Reilly will terminate at a T intersection with Jackson. And that the vacated stub can be combined with tract E to form an additional building lot. If the city grants the 3 modification requests, then the total number of lots in Nadana Way would increase from the 28 lots originally approved, but not above the 33 lot density limit the city identified as applicable in the 2008 PUD approval. Since the city already issued its final approval for the final development plan under section 10.060, it has approved the entire project as a 28 lot PUD. The only current questions are, will the city allow the applicant to plat the remaining lot in 2 phases instead of 1? And will the city allow an increase in the number of lots in Nadana Way from the 28 lots to 30 lots? So agency comments that we received. The City of Rockaway Beach engineer, HBH Engineering, provided a letter which identifies issues that need to be addressed through more formal engineering review if this request is approved. Department of State Lands provided a response to the wetland use notification, which identifies additional reporting and permitting that will need to be completed and obtained prior to the disturbance of the wetland areas. Department of Fish and Wildlife provided a comment on the application that all stream crossings are to comply with fish passage requirements and ODFW approval. Additional comments were received supporting the city's requirements for a 15-foot riparian setback from McMillan Creek and offer coordinating support to develop a plan to mitigate impacts. ODOT was also contacted for comment on the application concerning the potential need for a second connection to Highway 101, but it was unable to provide comment on the application without a traffic study. We have received a significant amount of public testimony that you have copies of with you from these individuals. These are the ordinance standards that apply to this application, and we'll be going through each of these. So the first ordinance we're going to discuss is the R1 single family dwelling residential zone. So with this, we have lot size minimums. And important to note that the applicant was approved for a PUD overlay in 2008, which allows for the development of lots lesser than the minimum lot size requirements for the R1 zone. The applicant is seeking to create 2 additional lots not included in the 2008 approved plan, which are lesser than the minimum lot size requirements of the R1 zone. The density requirements don't apply to this. The minimum lot width is similar to the minimum lot size. The applicant was approved with PUD overlay in 2008 and allows for development of lots lesser than the minimum depth requirement for the R1 zone. The applicant is seeking to add through this modification 2 additional lots, which are also lesser than the minimum width requirements of the R1 zone. Same for minimum lot depth. Because of the PUD overlay allowing for the development of lots lesser than the minimum depth requirement of the R1 zone, the applicant is also seeking to add through this modification lots that are lesser than the minimum depth requirement. Front yard setbacks, rear yard setbacks, side setbacks, and lot setback exceptions are all reviewed at the time of building application. Same with building height. However, it should be noted that a height variance was granted in the 2008 approval, which will carry over with the PUD approval. And minimum lot vegetation standards will also be reviewed for conformance when building permits are requested. The special area wetlands overlay zone, which is SA zone. We have DSL and the Army Corps of Engineers permits. The application was provided to DSL for review. The DSL response outlined additional reporting and permitting that's necessary for this application. The shoreline sitting criteria, docks, access through waterways, aquatic vegetation removal do not apply to this application. Dredging, piling installation, shoreline stabilization, and fill also do not apply to this application.
The zone boundary determination does apply. The application has been provided to DSL for review, and DSL has responded outlining requirements for an updated site investigation to be conducted by a qualified agent to determine the exact location of the zone boundary. In addition, the flood hazard overlay zone, the FHO zone, applies to this application. Requirements are that engineered plans to minimize flood damage. The city engineers have outlined all the public improvements to be constructed within the public right-of-way. The public right-of-way is located outside of the flood zone and therefore is consistent with the requirements of minimizing flood damage. Utilities constructed to minimize flood damage also applies in a similar way. The city engineers have also outlined that improvements be constructed within the public right-of-way, and the public right-of-way is located outside of the flood zone and therefore is consistent with the requirement of minimizing flood damage. Drainage to reduce flood damage. Our city engineers recommend directing the applicant to submit an acceptable storm drainage report prior to final design of the storm drainage system. The requirement of base flood elevation does not apply to this application due to the number of lots being created and acreage. Site preparation and notification do not apply to this application. The Department of State Lands and Army Corps of Engineer review and permitting does apply. As noted in the response from DSL, additional permitting and review are necessary prior to the site preparation work for this application. Department of State Lands and the Army Corps of Engineers jurisdiction does apply to this application. Therefore, Section 6 of the wetland notification zone does not apply. The tsunami overlay zone also applies to this application. The purpose and objective of the tsunami hazard overlay zone is that the evacuation routes improvement requirements except single family dwellings on single lots and parcels. Only development, substantial improvements, and land division in the tsunami hazard overlay zone shall incorporate evacuation measures and improvements, including necessary vegetation management, which are consistent with and conform to the adopted tsunami evacuation facilities plan. Such measures include on-site improvements. I will note that the applicant does not address any on-site evacuation route improvements. The current tsunami evacuation route is located at the termination of Riley Street past Jackson. The applicant has requested the city vacate the eastern portion of Riley to allow for future developments of an additional lot, which would block the current evacuation route. Off-site improvements are also a requirement. The applicant does not address off-site evacuation route improvements. The current tsunami evacuation route is located at the termination of Riley Street past Jackson. The applicant has requested the city vacate the eastern portion of Riley to allow for future development of an additional lot, which would block the current evacuation route. Evacuation route signage is not addressed in the application. Evacuation route improvements have also not been addressed in the application. The Article 10 planned unit development, the standards for a minimum lot size. In the 2008 approval of the Nadana Wave PUD, the Planning Commission allowed for the creation of minimum lot sizes, which were lesser than the parent R1 zone and still applied to that application today. Open space, the applicant has provided the required open space, most of which is maintained wetlands and public ways. Density, as noted in the applicant's memorandum, with the addition of the 2 proposed additional lots, the density requirements are still met. The subdivision lot sizes, the minimum area with depth frontage requirements are lesser than the parent R1 zone. Density, which is the one requirement that be maintained, is in conformance. Off-street parking will be reviewed when building permits are accepted. Signs, the applicant submitted for sign approval with the original PUD application and is not seeking modifications to these signs. Height, the applicant previously sought and have been approved for variances for height over the maximum for this PUD Copies of the variance requests are included in the original application materials. Streets and roads. The city engineer comments attached to the application direct the applicant to construct all streets to meet or exceed the City of Rockaway Beach design standards and technical specifications. Recreation facilities, there are none proposed in the application. Common area, the applicant has provided common open space and CC&R is included in the application for the Planning Commission to consider. Easements, the comments provided by our city engineer direct all public improvements to be constructed within the existing public right-of-way or the right-of-way to be dedicated to the city as part of the development. In summary, the applicant has requested approval for modification to the Nadano Way planned unit development that was approved by the City of Rockaway Beach in 2008. The requested modifications would allow the applicant to develop phase 2 in 2 subphases and to create 2 additional lots. In addition to these modifications, the applicant has also requested the city vacate east of Bradley Street to form an additional future building lot. Staff has solicited comments from other affected agencies and stakeholders, and those comments have been included in the record. Most notably, the city engineer has identified several necessary improvements of existing city facilities, including water and sewer, stressing the importance of water supply to meet fire flow. In general, necessary public infrastructure improvements that are triggered by proposed development must be provided by the developer of the project. If approved, the conditions of approval related to infrastructure improvements can be attached, which must be met prior to final plat approval. Staff have identified substantive criteria for review of the request by the Planning Commission and including the criteria in this report, along with comments where appropriate. However, at the public hearing, any party may provide testimony addressing criteria or other criteria the party believes is applicable to the request. The Planning Commission should carefully consider the request, including all the oral and written testimony on record and presented at the hearing, including comments from the city engineer, government agencies, and other interested parties. After considering testimony as it relates to this applicable criteria, the Planning Commission will need to make a decision on the request. If the Commission determines that the modifications to the Nadano Way planned unit development meet the standards of the Rockaway Beach zoning ordinance, they can make a motion to approve the request, including a statement that generally reflects the facts and rationale relied upon to reach this decision. The motion should also direct staff to prepare findings, conclusions, and a final order to implement the decision. A motion to deny the request should set forth the general facts and rationale for the decision and direct staff to prepare the final order. The decision to approve or deny the request will be subject to a 15-day appeal period that will begin after the written findings to support the decision have been signed by the Planning Commission chair. Staff recommendation: approval of the applicant's request to 1, develop phase 2 in 2 subphases instead of 1. 2, to create 2 lots instead of 1 at the north end of Jackson Street, numbered lots 21 and 22 in the plan submitted with this application. And to 3, create 4 lots instead of 3 out of the lots numbered 13, 14, 15, and 16 on the plan submitted with the application with the conditions identified below. And denial of the applicant's request to vacate the east of O'Reilly Street at Jackson. In the event of an approval, staff offer the following conditions for the commissioner's considerations. Approval is based on the plan submitted. Any substantial changes to the approved plan shall be submitted to the City of Rockaway Beach as a new application for a PUD amendment. The applicant shall submit drafts of appropriate deed restrictions and protective covenants to provide for the maintenance of common areas and to assure that the objectives of the PUD shall be followed. The applicant shall report a deed restriction or other covenants applicable with each lot on the subdivision in a form acceptable to the State of Oregon Fish and Wildlife Department that indemnifies ODFW for any damages or inconveniences to persons, real property, or personal injury caused by big game or fur bearing animals. The applicant shall submit evidence that all required improvements of Section 44 of Rockaway Beach subdivision ordinance have been met. The applicant shall submit evidence that the requirements for monuments surveys as identified in Section 45 and 46 of the Rockaway Beach subdivision ordinance have been met. Within 1 year, the applicant shall submit final portion plat in conformance with the approved plan and Sections 30 and 31 of the Rockaway Beach subdivision ordinance. The Planning Commission, upon written request by the applicant, may grant an extension of the tentative plan approval for a period of 1 year. Failure to obtain a time extension or final plat approval prior to the expiration of the tentative plan shall render the tentative plan approval void. Such yearly time extensions will be necessary until all phases of the development have been granted final plat approval. Any utilities serving the development shall be installed underground. All public underground utilities, including but not limited to water, gravity sewer, sanitary sewer, force main, and storm drainage installed in phase 2 for future use by phase 2 or have not been used since constructed shall be tested at the expense of the applicant, accepted by the city engineer. All stream crossings, including utilities, are to comply with fish passage requirements. The Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife shall approve in advance any stream crossings. The development shall avoid entering city designated riparian setback of 15 feet from McMillan Creek. If the site constraints will not allow for this, the applicant shall coordinate with the Department of Fish and Wildlife to develop a plan to mitigate for these impacts and shall provide evidence of approval. Any development within these areas which could result in a loss of fish and wildlife habitat would require that the impacts be mitigated consistent with current habitat mitigation standards. The applicant shall construct all public improvements, not limited to sewer, water, storm, and street design, and construction shall meet or exceed the City of Rockaway Beach design standards and technical specifications. The cost for plan review by the city engineer shall be the responsibility of the applicant. The applicant shall submit an acceptable storm drainage report prior to final design for the storm drainage system, including basin map and flow rates for review by the city engineer. The applicant shall provide evidence that a 1200C permit has been obtained from the Department of Environmental Quality for erosion control prior to grading or construction development. The applicant shall provide evidence that all sanitary sewer designs have been received with written approval from the Department of Environmental Quality, including a pre-design report for the new regional pump station to serve the development. The applicant shall provide the following off-site improvements: regional sanitary sewer pump station and related infrastructure, including but not limited to the following: 3-phase submersible duplex pump station with control, davit crane, on-site generator, telemetry, lighting, and fencing. The tract in which the pump station is to be located is to be dedicated to the city. Sanitary sewer force main from the regional pump station to the existing White Dove pump station. Extend the White Dove sanitary sewer force main from Northwest 23rd Avenue to the pump station at Northwest 17th. All public improvements shall be constructed within the existing public right-of-way or right-of-way that will be dedicated to the city as part of this development. The applicant shall provide a traffic study for the development, including peak season and emergency evacuation needs, as well as the intersection of Highway 101 and Beach Street. The applicant shall complete a wetland delineation to be reviewed and approved by the Department of State Lands to determine if there is a change in the wetland boundary and if a wetland removal bill permit is required. This delineation shall be sufficiently sized to include both phase 2 and 3. The approval from the Department of State Lands must be current, no more than 2 years old. The applicant shall submit evidence that all necessary permits and approvals from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and the Oregon Department of State Lands have been obtained for impacts to wetlands in accordance with the approved plan. The applicant shall submit evidence of approval from the state fire marshal for all fire hydrant locations, street widths, and applicable fire code requirements. Prior to final plat approval, the applicant shall be responsible for providing and installing all improvements, including sewer, water, street, stormwater management facilities, street lighting, street name signs, street trees in accordance with subdivision ordinance section 44 entitled Improvements Required and in accordance with the engineer approved plans. The applicant shall be responsible for all costs necessary for off-site public infrastructure improvements that are triggered by the proposed development. And finally, the applicant shall establish a homeowners association for the development, and all open space within the development shall be owned and maintained by the homeowners association. The required homeowners association shall be responsible for any and all necessary stormwater maintenance facilities that serve the development. The required homeowners association will be responsible for maintaining the stormwater quality tracks.
Thank you. Has planning staff received any correspondence on this application?
Yes, the testimony that we received has been provided to the planning commission. Since this hearing commenced, we have received 2 additional pieces of public testimony that our city reporter will share.
And that first testimony was submitted by Nancy Webster and reads as follows. We citizens have not been provided with all the relevant information regarding the Dodonna Way development in a timely manner. We initially were told in May 2024 that this application had been denied. Then we were not informed that the denial had been withdrawn. I requested for information May 7th, but only received 6 days later. Yesterday, June 19, less than 24 hours before the hearing. As a result, it's been difficult for my neighbors and me to participate in an adequate investigation of this development proposal. This is a request, number 1. That the record be left open for any additional evidence, arguments, or testimony that participants wish to submit or at least 7 days after the hearing. ORS 197.796, 0.797, subsection 6. Requires that the city provide this. This ORS means that the public can submit written comments for 7 days after the hearing. 2. State law, ORS 92.040, requires subdivision applications no more than 10 years old to be considered in order to weigh whether they comply with current land use regulations. There are serious concerns as evidenced by the staff report. This development would not be allowed under current regulations. 3. The applicant has not included all of the prior city decisions on the subdivision in their application, nor has the planning department included them in their materials. Documents are necessary to understand whether or not this action is allowed. City option fairness. The city has all kinds of options for stopping the development. The decision for the planning commission that it could be appealed to or taken up by the city council. There are many parts of the land use regulations that will allow them to affect the application based on the concerns we've outlined. Separately, the city council has authority to enact a moratorium that would prohibit any new development in a given area until it figures out issues requiring availability, evacuation, safety, etc. There are specific state law requirements they would have to meet in order to do that. ORS 197.20. Specific concerns. 1, the lack of a second exit from the Dodonna Beach neighborhood. This issue was brought up 16 years ago during the previous 2008 application and never resolved. This area already has about 400 houses in an area at high risk from tsunamis, earthquakes, floods, high tides, rising sea levels, extreme weather, and wildfires. 2, there are serious concerns about drinking water quality and quantity in Rockaway Beach. Let's resolve the city's water issues before adding more houses. The entire Dodonna Beach neighborhood is in the DEQ-defined source water protection area for Rockaway Beach's groundwater source, their wells. These shallow wells are in close proximity to poorly regulated septic systems. Construction, roads, pesticides, fertilizers, performance chemicals, and stormwater all put additional stresses on these wells. These wells are in close proximity to the ocean, so they are subject to saltwater infiltration. 5, houses in this proposed high-density development will be built in close proximity to McMillan Creek, which will create more stresses on it, further degrading it. This creek is home to beaver, fish, and other wildlife. It flows into the Dodonna Marsh estuary, a saltwater and tidal water area that flows into the Inland Bay and the ocean. This estuary is designated as salmon migration and salmon nursery waters, and it does not need more degradation from human activities. 6, Jetty Creek, Rockaway's surface drinking water source. In 2008, was approximately 20% clear cut and pesticide sprayed. Today, 15 years later, this watershed is approximately 90% clear cut and pesticide sprayed. These activities have seriously compromised water quality and quantity and quality. Today, we have lower stream flows in the summer, resulting in less drinking water available. Let's enact a moratorium on new construction in the Dodonna Beach neighborhood until we have resolved these concerns. There are both public health and safety issues that need to be resolved. Also, there should be no more degradation, wetlands. Thanks to Nancy Webster, 6536 Whiteland Avenue, Rockaway Beach. Second, email testimony submitted was submitted by Susan Norris, 25785 Beach Drive, Rockaway Beach. Submitted to City Planner Mary Johnson as follows. Please accept the following as input and comments associated with the proposal of Dodonna Way B subdivision. On one hand, I applaud you for holding this meeting and giving the public a voice in the outcome. On the other hand, I'm concerned that the decision has already been made and we are only be placated by this meeting. Upon walking the area this morning, it appears that the developers have already started clearing the land. Land that is full of watershed plants, water, and wildlife. From my understanding, the Clean Water Act with protection for wetlands was enacted in 1972. As part of that, each state was directed to create an inventory of wetlands. Likewise, states were encouraged to work with counties, cities, and towns in developing this inventory and determining methods to protect them. In the 30 years that I've owned a home here, I don't believe that Rockaway has ever done this. I've watched section after section and lot after lot of wetland area be bulldozed over and filled into development. This happened as recently as 2023, when 2 wetland areas, one part of Tillamook County and one part of the city of Rockaway Beach, Madonna, were replaced with houses. Word up and down the coast is that Rockaway Beach does whatever it wants to do, including building wherever they want to build. I have recently seen some great changes with the town management of Rockaway and hope those days are behind us. In 2021, Oregon adopted the Oregon Climate Plan, first in the nation, a plan to harness the power or tidal wetlands all along the Oregon coast, forests and ecosystems to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. How can we do that if our wetlands are being torn up and filled in? People like to buy swampland, watershed land, because it is inexpensive. All they have to do is convince a couple of politicians that they can do something with it by adding a couple of truckloads of rock. Never is there any consideration for the large amount of wildlife that the wetland supports or where wildlife will go. We are told that X% of open land will be available for wildlife. If wildlife could vote for this, I guarantee that they would say no. The watershed and Sedonaway development, as well as the land that stretches south of Riley towards Beach Avenue, supports all sorts of wildlife. It is also the most western migratory route for birds heading north in spring and south in the fall. These include, but are not limited to, Swainson's thrush, bush tits, Wilson, orange-crowned, yellow, hermit, and black-throated gray warblers, Pacific slope flycatchers, fan-tailed pigeons, black-headed grosbeaks, leafless hummingbirds, swallows, yellowthroat, etc. They need food to eat and water to drink, and a nice watershed perfectly fits their needs. I could go on, but I think you get my feeling here. People look at the facts and think hard before turning another watershed in Madonna into another development. Sincerely, Susan Morris. Chair, reporter would direct you back to number 8, please.
So the commission can now ask questions of staff regarding the application. Stephanie?
This one's very challenging because of the previous commission's decision quite some time ago. Do you have any further guidance to us as we struggle to review only a limited amount of the information we have without understanding why the previous commission may have approved it?
So the 2008 approval still stands. That's the one thing I would remind everybody. What you're really looking at and what you're approving today are the modification. So irregardless of whether or not you approve those modification requests, the applicant's approval of 2008 is still valid. That's how I would advise you to look at this application. That's based off of legal counsel and other planners at the Department of Land Conservation and Development have all kind of advised the same, is that we look at these modification requests. And irregardless, the applicant still has 2008 approval, whether you approve or deny modifications.
I just have one more question. Is it standard in the state for the PUD approvals to be approved forever?
I couldn't really tell you. I would like to have a good answer for that. It really varies from application to application. Originally, when I looked at this, I did think that the application was similar to the Lake Lyle Estates, where it had, it could be no longer valid after the period of 10 years.
But based on further discussion with our legal counsel and others who reviewed our code, given the language that's provided in the PUD section specifically, it calls out only that first phase. So when you're approving a phased application at this time, it sets a time period for that first application, but nothing subsequently. So that approval hangs out indefinitely. Whether or not that is standard, I really couldn't say.
I as well, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Yeah. It's all right.
I as well have many questions regarding the proposal. And my first concern, talking about, I understand that the applicant owns the land and was approved for phased development. And in all fairness to the applicant, we do need to be considered in how we go about this. I believe that the staff has done an outstanding job in addressing the current concerns, land changes, life changes. And so even though new phases are approved, we still have to today and in regard to the future address the conditions that exist on that land within the city of Rockaway Beach. So because of the ways it seems we can address, I don't know how to even ask this. There are so many things to be addressed by the applicant that are outstanding. Quite honestly, I'm wondering if it is denial or put on hold, something like that, that allows the applicant to address these considerations. They may or may not want to follow through. We don't know. We can't make any guesses. And so I'm trying to be as even and thoughtful and thorough as possible. Obviously, the residents, this is why we're all here. So I don't know. I'm not sure how to decide how to deal with this tonight.
Any other questions?
I was a little bit confused. It took me a while to try to figure out what the different phases were in the various maps. And it says in the report that phase 2 would be 11 lots east of Kittiwake Drive, which would be numbered 9 to 19, and we'd be taken from what is now tract F. And I tried, when I counted the lots east of Kittiwake Drive, I came up with 15 if the splits were allowed as requested. So is it actually 11 that they want to develop, or is it 15, when you add up all of the different lots? It looks like we have 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and then it goes up to 17 through 21 as split. But then there's 2 additional lots at the end, requested at the end of Riley Street.
So I see what you're looking at. So tract F, if you were to grant the modification request, would have 13.
And F would, and then E has the request for 2. Do we consider E at this point as being approved for construction if we grant these requests to split or have 2 lots there?
So what you're looking at is right now, they have approval for phase 2. They're looking to do that in 2 sub-phases. So they would do the tract F first, and then tract G, I believe, is the second.
Okay.
So they'll be split instead of 2 phases, there'll be 2 and then 3.
Right. And G is west of Kittiwake Drive, and F is the east portion. So I'm just trying to get a handle on exactly how many we're being asked to approve for construction in phase one. So is E, which is that little hidden corner up at the end of Riley Street, is that included in the request? Or,
Not at this time.
okay,
It's reserved for potential future development.
okay.
That's still from that initial.
Okay, and on the map, that's sheet 2 of 6 that we've been given, there isn't an illustration of what they want to have happen with the end of Riley Street that I can see. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. I have lots of other questions, but I think maybe some of them will be answered in the presentation. Thank you.
But just to, I know this was approved in 2008, but I am a little confused if what we're discussing, is this considering a preliminary or final?
Preliminary. So you are looking to modify the preliminary plat. So if you approve this, it would still come back for final plat.
Okay, and then it does get, and I imagine you probably came across the same thing and as it was just stated. You know, sometimes because of the numbering of the lots are now starting with lot 1 instead of the old numbering, which was it just gets, yeah. Lot 1 is considered to be this phase number 3. We are trying to do making phase 2 and making phase 2, turning phase 2 into phase 2 and 3.
Correct.
Okay. The lots have been renumbered since phase 1.
Correct.
We are going with the numbering on the phase 2 plans.
Yes.
Okay.
But you're changing the original.
There will be an opportunity.
Yeah, we'll hold the comment until we have audience comment. Okay, thank you.
Okay, in some places, the subdivision name is Nadona Wave Phase 1 for what we are talking about.
So the the original tract that was recorded, so phase 1 of the original approval has been completed. Those lots have been developed, there are homes there now, the infrastructure is in. So now we're looking at phase 2, and they're asking to modify phase 2. So it's split into 2 separate phases. So look at it as phase 2 and phase 1 and phase.
Okay, on the planned unit development application, they are actually calling the subdivision name Nadona Wave Phase 1. Quoting it. So so I'm I believe it's just Nadona Wave is the subdivision name.
This may be a better question for the applicant.
Okay.
To verify for you.
Okay. Another city question
Sure.
is, since the 2008 approved plan, does the city know how many dwellings have been built in Nadona Beach between then and now?
I do not.
Okay. And you've already answered with the studies that they'll have to do, but I had questions about that, but what's the DSL and Fish and Wildlife, all the people that they have to do studies again. But how does, with the tsunami route, is that? And I don't, person that submitted who this application for, is that their responsibility, or does the city part of it? I mean, do they work together, or or they have to come up with a plan?
There should be a plan for any, whether or not that's in partnership with the city, is to be determined.
Okay. And then the section there with the Riley Street that the city, and this is that city property? I'm not understanding the reason the city needs to they want the city to vacate. So please, can you expand on that?
So when they did phase one, they dedicated the streets that they constructed for phase one and phase two to the city. That includes Riley Street. That easternmost portion, which would be east of Jackson, they're looking for that little stub to be vacated so they could create another building block. My concern with that at this time, not saying that it wouldn't be appropriate in the future, but at this time, because that's our one tsunami evacuation route, I would not recommend approving that request. Additionally, our engineers had some concerns regarding how that met state fire code with giving turnaround for vehicles. I know the applicant is requesting that in the future, and respectfully would request that request be brought back at a later time.
Well, and does Rockaway Beach short-term rental ordinance, does that apply to Nadona Beach?
To portions. So portions of Nadona Beach are within the city limits and portions are outside. So our STR cap applies only to those portions within the city limits. And this entire development is within the city limits. So our cap would apply to this entire development.
Okay. And then with the lot number changing and dividing two lots, the request is two lots each to be divided in two, to give the additional two. Would the approved variance for height carry over because the lot numbers changed and now this is changing for two lots, making one lot into two? Would that change that anyway?
So I think variances that were approved apply to specific lots. I would have to compare them to see whether or not the variances have impact to those lots that are being requested to be divided. I would argue if they do, that those variances no longer apply to those lots since they have changed conformity. And I would expect the applicant to get another request for those kind of variances for those subdivided lots, should they have an approved variance for them.
But not the number changing of the lots doesn't.
I would say the size, it does, because they were specifically called out in those variance approvals. But the lots so if the lot in question is one of the lots that they're requesting to be split, that variance request, if it were to have an approved height, would no longer be valid for it. But if it's one of the lots that is not changing shape or size, just the number, those variances would still.
That's it for me. Thank you.
Any other questions, commissioners, for staff?
I have questions.
Yes. Go ahead. Ron.
I don't know. Okay. Kind of in conjunction with what we've kind of been talking about. I did, and again, I'm so sorry. This is a lot, and I'm just trying to put it all together myself as well. There were some things mentioned in the attorney from HBH Consulting, or not the attorney, I'll correct that. HBH Consulting Engineers, with regard to what Georgianne was talking about, based on the second page of the report from HBH, Section C, based on civil engineering drawings prepared by Morgan Civil Engineering from back in 2020 with regard to the two lot numbers. It does say does not have the minimum required 20 foot of row frontage required per City of Rockaway Beach Subdivision Ordinance Section 35, as only approximately 15 feet of frontage is provided at the north end of Jackson Street for lot 22 and approximately 14 feet for lot 15. So if because the row was not in existence at that time, does that mean that it is now? And then secondarily to that, what does the 25 feet of row, does that connect with our, the request to vacate those sections of the streets? Does that make sense?
I don't understand the second part to your question, but let me answer the first part first, and then you can restate that question for me if you do. Okay. So when it comes to the frontage requirements that are being discussed in the HPH letter, those minimum standards are being called out from the R1 single family residential zone. And due to the PUD overlay, those standards have all been reduced. The only requirement standard outside of the PUD overlay that still exists from the R1 is the density requirement.
And then the sections of street that they're asking us to, I'm sorry, I'm trying to find the appropriate terminology that they used. For us to remove our portion of the street. I'm so sorry.
Vacate?
Correct. Are those areas in that section? And will those sections that I just asked with regard to the 25 foot of row, is that going to require a variance upon build at a later time?
So our staff would recommend, and based on our engineer's response, they would also recommend that street vacation not be approved at this time. That's something that we would recommend the applicant bring back at a later date for consideration. Because it will right now, if it were to be approved, could create some development issues as well as fire turnaround.
Okay, and part of the city recommendation, the conditions include ensuring that they're following the ordinance, which would address the need for an additional street access. Is that correct?
No, so staff recommendations include the request for a traffic study to show potential need for egress onto 101 for emergencies, but does not require a second access outrightly.
So having the additional homes added per our guidelines would not require a secondary entrance for residents that would be an ingress or an egress, correct?
There's nothing that would automatically, I mean, when we're developing and looking at single lot approvals for building, there's nothing there that just automatically triggers a second egress to be required. While I 100% understand the concerns involving that, that's why we would request a traffic study be done to show that the neighborhood is able to handle that capacity.
Okay, so the traffic study is what would actually make that apparent.
Yeah, and you would, upon final plat approval.
Okay, okay. All right.
We don't have to add that with our decision. And there, it's in. Okay.
Good question.
Isn't it part of the listed conditions from the staff report? Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Or recommendation?
Yes.
Much reading.
Yeah, there's
That's it. In what you showed up on the screen, when you're discussing this staff report, you mentioned something about signs. But I didn't see that in the site visit. So are they, what kind of signages are going to be?
So in the original application, there were signage for the open space that were provided. There are no application requests have been requested to those.
Okay. And then common space. I'm seeing in one of these, it shows common space as being lot 1. Is that for the, it says they're required to have common space. It talks about common space, but then it shows it as lot 1. And then then it's wetlands 2. Tract A is a common area. But would that be a question for them or
Yes.
the applicant?
So tract A is left open for common space. I can quickly share my map, might be a little helpful.
There it is. It's on the page 1 of sheet 1 of 6 on Dona Wave Phase 2.
So Commissioner, if you would look at our screen up here, if you can see my mouse here, this is tract A, and that is reserved for common open space. What they are seeking modification to develop is this tract F, which is this large portion here, and then tract G across the street, which is this additional common larger portion.
Sorry, can you just show us those common areas again? I couldn't see your plan.
Yeah, so tract A is right here. This is that common space.
The roadways that you see throughout the development are also common open space.
Thank you.
I read that. The roads are considered open space.
I have a question, speaking of open spaces. On tract F, there is a lot of also proposed open space to be retained and only a portion to be developed. Will we have some type of would we be able to put some type of restrictive covenant or some requirement that they have dedicate that property as proposed open space as well?
Absolutely.
Okay. And I understand that tracks B and D have also been dedicated to common areas as well.
Correct.
Okay.
questions or comments for the staff? For our applicant's presentation, are the applicants present and would they like to present any additional information on this application? If so, please stand at the podium and present your name and address for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Dean Alderman. I'm the attorney for the applicant. My mailing address is 805 Southwest Broadway, Suite 1580, Portland, Oregon, 97205. I have a presentation. I have a feeling I'm going to be answering quite a lot of questions. Let me start with the simplest one, Commissioner, which is why is this phase 1 if it's also phase 2 and phase 3? The answer to that is that in 2008, this song did the subdivision and got the PUD approval. She actually subdivided the entire property. All of the property is a subdivision called Nadana Wave Phase 1, consisting of some numbered lots plus Tract A, Tract B, Tract C, Tract D, Tract D, Tract F. And if we go down to G, Tract G, the legal description of each of those lots of the parcels is something like Tract F, Nadana Wave Phase 1. The part that's going to be subdivided under this application will get a new name that will be called Nadana Wave Phase 2, and then the numbering of the lots will continue from where it left off in Phase 1. Does that help explain why it looks like Phase 1 in the application, but we are applying for permission to create Phase 2? And in fact, the entire property is legally named Phase 1 right now.
Okay.
As you have heard, this is a very long-term project compared to most that you have seen. I'd like to express my appreciation to the city planner for the thorough job of explaining the history of this project, how we thought of it, what is truly at issue today, which is fairly simple. This is property that 16 years ago was approved for 28 lots. Mrs. Song is seeking approval to make it 30 lots, still within the density standard as it existed and as it exists today. So it is not a brand new approval for another 20 lots. Carry out the next step of something the city had long since approved, a decision that has long since become final. I read all of the comments except for the very last few that came in. And they seem to break down, and your questions that you asked of staff, into maybe 3 or 4 basic categories, which I'll take into. First is the question of the evacuation. This is a really interesting one because till sometime in the last 8 or 10 months, there was no sign saying this was an evacuation route. I looked at the picture that one of the opponents submitted showing the sign on the fence on Riley Street. It wasn't there in August of last year. It wasn't there in 2015. And it points into a public street, and then behind it is Tract E, which was approved as future development. It wasn't approved in 2008 as an evacuation route. That somebody may have put a sign up that says it's an evacuation route. Doesn't make it much. It makes it, perhaps optimism, but it doesn't actually make it a route. I did find the city's map, official evacuation routes. I will ask this in to be part of the record. It does show that there is a route going east on Riley Street, and then it turns to the south well before it gets to the railroad track. That it was never anticipated in the map, and it's not shown on the map, that there would ever be an evacuation route that crossed the railroad track at Riley Street. Presumably the property to the south was going to connect that to an access point that looks on scale like about 200 feet to the south to cross the track. But the plan doesn't show that the track would ever be across Riley Street for an evacuation route. It wasn't a route, it wasn't a condition. Regardless of the signage, it isn't there. There's no easement for it. As Ms. Johnson told you, your decision has to be based on the criteria that are in your zoning code. One of which is that the planned development overlay essentially substitutes for the lot by lot specific dimensional standards, street frontage, width, area. It lets you, going to use a non-land use technical term here, it lets us sort of mush up all the lots. And as long as the total comes out to be right, as long as there's no more lots than what the density allows for the entire parcel, a developer can go put the lots and arrange them in different creative ways. You could actually, and I've seen it done, do a PUD where no lot has any road frontage because all the roads are private and they're inside the common. That's simply the standard that is here, and it's the standard that's in your code. Whether it is a good standard is a question for the city council, but it is the standard that applies to this application right now today. Anyway, that's the evacuation route. Since I think Ms. Webster in her email requested the record be held open, we joined in that request because we'd like to submit additional information in particular about wetlands. And I'll come to a little bit of that. Bill Howard, Mrs. Song's excavator, is here and will speak a little bit to that. And would like a little time to review the proposed conditions, in particular to get an understanding of the requirement for the force main to go not just from this property to the first pump station, but if I read it right, to connect from the first pump station to the second pump station, which seems like a full duty on that. We'd like at least to understand it and know what we're getting into if we repeat that. Third is the wetland question itself. Mr. Howard will tell you that all of the fill was done in accordance with the permits from 2008. Possibly there's an exception for a little bit of a corner of a lot here and there. Mrs. Song's wetlands expert has been out delineating. We hope to get you a delineation and show that the area we're developing is the area that was already filled and mitigated by Mrs. Song creating other wetland inside Tract A. That we're not proposing a net loss of wetlands. We're not proposing actually to mess with the wetlands, except for one circumstance that we learned about this week, which is that since that time, Jackson Street has become a wetland or some portion. The lots, the proposed lots are drawn. But Jackson Street is a wetland, and obviously it has to get improved if it's going to serve those lots. But Mrs. Song and Adana Development would mitigate the loss of that new wetland in whatever fashion was necessary, whatever DSL might require. But I mentioned that to you. Part of what we'll use the time for is to figure out what the solution is to deal with the fact that a public street has become a wetland. I've never run into that situation before. A couple of comments on the responses to the questions that were raised. One, apropos of traffic. A Mr. and Ms. DeJong who live on Adana Avenue between Sunset and Western objected on the ground that this development is going to create a lot of traffic. First, 20-something lots have already been approved here, just not as specific lots yet. We're asking for an additional couple of lots, even if you call it the whole thing 20 lots. There are currently roughly 210 homes that are north of Western Street, which is the cross street that their home is on. So we are proposing what might be an additional burden, about 8% on Adana Avenue. There are, I think, about 450 or 500 homes in Adana Beach altogether. I don't know how to evaluate the commercial activity that's there. But as a percentage of the burden on the Beach Street connection, this is maybe a 3% increase, and most of it is an increase the city approved years ago. There is not a sudden influx of traffic that is coming from this project, because although it sounds like a large number of lots, it is not large in relation to the number of houses that are already in place in Adana Beach. With regard to other traffic in general, Mrs. Song would certainly, if the traffic study recommends it, be willing to build traffic calm, speed bumps, etc. on Adana Avenue, on Riley Street, as recommended. That slower is better. People don't come to the beach to drive faster. They come or should come to relax and slow down. We support that. With regard to the evacuation route, with regard to an evacuation route, a second evacuation route certainly would be nice. It would be nice if Section Line Road ran east to connect to the highway. But that's something that requires, one, permission from ODOT, two, permission from the railroad, and three, it isn't Mrs. Song's land. She can't create a route of land she doesn't own and has control. That's something to keep in mind. Maybe a traffic study will help inform the city's thinking about where a second route might be constructed in the future, but there isn't a place to construct it today. I'd be happy to take a shot at answering any questions. I suspect there are a couple.
I'm still confused about the additional number of lots that are being asked to be developed. I understand that in the section that is lots 13, 14, 15, and 16, that section originally had 3 lots and we're requesting 4. Is that correct?
That's my understanding.
That's one. 22 and 21 were 1 lot, and we're being asked to approve 2 lots there, correct?
Yes.
So that's 2 new or 2 additional lots. And then where's the end of Riley Street, that there was 1 lot approved there, and now you're requesting approval to build 2 there?
No, not at the end of Riley Street. Maybe here I'm a little bit of the understanding the street vacation. We are not asking to vacate the east end of Riley Street. Now, we know that that is necessary as a turnaround, as a hammerhead style turnaround for fire and emergency vehicles. At some point, maybe this year, maybe next year, maybe in 15 years, who knows? The property to the south of Riley Street will undoubtedly get developed. It is probably going to have to extend Jackson Street to the south in order to provide access to whatever lots go into that property. At that point, instead of Riley Street having a flat dead end and a little bit of Jackson Street up, Riley Street has a T intersection. The hammerhead isn't going to serve any emergency access purpose at that point. Whether it serves an evacuation purpose is a different question. We included that in the application. The request simply that you understand that in the future, if the south property develops and the hammerhead is no longer needed for fire engines, that you would at least listen to a request at that time to vacate that part of Riley Street that a fire engine. But it is not part of today's request. We are simply raising the issue in advance to let you know that it's there in case something comes up.
Okay. The verbiage in the application is provide that when the owner of the land to the south extends Jackson Street south into that property, the city will vacate the east stub of Riley Street so that Riley Street will terminate in a T intersection with Jackson Street, and the vacated stub can be combined with Track D to form an additional building lot. But you're not asking for us to approve the additional building lot?
That was correct.
Okay.
We are simply pointing it out now rather than being surprised 1, 2, 5, 10 years in the future.
And I have a question about this tsunami evacuation route that's there now. How does the applicant intend to compensate for, that end of the road there and not have a route for the community to evacuate in the event of a tsunami?
We'll have to answer that in the period that the record is open, because frankly, when we filed the application, we did not know that anybody had designated that access as a route, as a tsunami escape route. That is a surprise to the landowner. On the existing plan, on the city's plan, it doesn't go into track. The route doesn't go into track E.
Okay.
It turns south. It turns south and runs kind of parallel, but not next to the railroad track, and crosses somewhere south. The sign that is up there is new. It wasn't there in August of last year. It's a new factor. And so I don't have an answer for you tonight about how we would do it.
All right. Thank you.
I have a question. Okay. And my apologies. It's a little bit in and out on the sound, so I apologize if I missed it. Do want to clarify part of what was just discussed was whether or not we are going to vacate that particular portion of Riley, and we're discussing, future what could happen, may happen if this gets developed. But really, in summary, the bottom line is that would be requiring any emergency access. All those things are going to be required for the development of the community as it is today. Those would still need to be followed. Is that correct?
Let me state your question as I understand it, and then tell me if I've misunderstood it. It's that if, for instance, if a turnaround is required today for fire engines, for emergency vehicles, that we are not applying to try to remove that turnaround. That is correct. We have to apply today with whatever the requirements are today for emergency vehicle access. And if your question is different, let me know and I'll try to answer that.
Okay, so whether we vacate that corner of Riley as per requested would have no, I mean, this is with regard to the future, that's a moot point. Is that right? Because right now we just want to make sure that the ordinances for the existing request for that, development areas followed within our ordinances. Whether okay.
Yes, since Mrs. Song is not asking you to vacate Riley Street today, merely to raise the possibility of that being something that might happen in the future, you don't, I think, actually have to make a decision on Riley Street today. But we do point out to you that Track E has never been designated, has never been granted as part of any sort of evacuation route. It was, to the contrary, identified as being land for future development by the city in 2008. That may be why the route turns to the south. It's the railroad track.
And I do have another question, but I believe it would be directed at staff. Should I ask that now or wait?
Why don't we wait?
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, go ahead, Georgia.
Oh, are CCNRs, because that's mentioned in the documentation we were given, are there CCNRs currently in place for the homes that are the existing homes there for phase one?
Yes, CCNRs are in place for the phase one homes. They were recorded, I believe, in 2009. And they refer to the potential future development. They apply really to the phase one homes and the common areas within phase one. That these CCNRs that I've submitted are based fairly closely on the phase ones, on the phase ones.
And tell us, I apologize, just a lot of information and the renumbering was a big issue going back.
If there is something that is confusing, it's because I did not do a good enough job of explaining it.
Oh, but I want to, so in 2008, and lots 1 through 24, building height max for lots 1 through 24. But if we split the lot, lots 21 and 22 are not required to have that 29 foot height change variance. That was approved with the 2008 because we're splitting, because the request is to split lot 24, which will now become lots 21 and 22 if that were to happen, since it's getting split.
My understanding of the purpose for the height variance was that it applied only to the easternmost tier of lots as they were proposed at that time. The idea was that they were next to the embankment, they were next to the railroad. Second floor wasn't going to block it. With the splitting of the two lots at the north end of Jackson Street, my assumption, and you probably have to look at this and submit something for additional material, is that the lot that is closer to the railroad track have the benefit of the height variance. The lot that is closer to the wetland away from the track would not.
Okay, so lots in 2008, building height max 29 feet for lots. This was the variance increase from 24 to 29 for lots 1 through 24. Max 36 feet for lots 25 and 28. That was a variance that was approved in 2008. So if the lots were bigger, would the height increase still need to be 36 feet?
I don't know. I'll have to read the variance fairly carefully and answer that. So that's a very good question as to what does the variance attach to if the lots come out looking substantially differently from the site plan that was approved in 2008.
Okay.
And Commissioner, we'll look at it on our end as well.
Okay. And then if I interpreted the plans correctly, lot sizes are different on plans for phase one in phase two. An example is phase one, lot 25 is 24 by 60. So that's 2,880 square feet. For phase two, it is now labeled lot 20 and it is 3,119 square feet.
Yeah, I don't,
So if you, that's another one that unless, so I'm having a,
I don't know about that particular lot combination. What I do know is that the areas that were used for lots are essentially the same areas that were proposed and approved for lots in 2008. Just that the lots are arranged a little differently in those two.
right.
This is not a request to put lots in areas that were promised as open space in 2008. This is a request to put lots in the areas that were approved for lots in 2008.
Right, I understand that, but when the square footage was given, and there was a height variance, and we discussed that the fact that if the lot changes, does that height variance happens to the height variance?
That's
Okay, but I know that's for the same, that's why I brought that up.
in
Let's
regards to the lot areas changing. That's one of the features of the PUD, which is that as long as you don't exceed, you can have larger lots and smaller lots fiddle around with them. You just can't go over the overall cap for the area, which I think is 32 lots for the total project. And we are asking, with these changes, we're asking for a total of 30.
that's pretty.
I spent a lot in the office wrestling numbers
Okay.
myself before I wrote this.
So just for clarification, the original application, 28 lots were approved and you're seeking 30 lots now, which would increase the density of what was approved, correct? Okay.
At the time of the approval, the maximum density for the overall property was 32 lots. So you're still below the maximum.
But the original application sought to have smaller lots than were required by our city code, correct?
The original application sought to have lots that were smaller than the minimum size that applies in the R1 zone. And that's because land that would have gone into lots if you were doing a standard nice grid subdivision instead went into common area. If you add the common area in, the average lot size meets the standard for the zone. It's just that instead of being somebody's private backyard, it's the common area, the wetland, the natural area that everybody shares.
Okay.
Maybe the city can clarify because
I have questions about that too.
Okay.
I have one other question. The lots 13, 14, 15, and 16, is there somewhere that shows me what was initially approved? The size of those lots? Because I know it's going from 3 to 4, and I'm curious what the square footage change is and the orientation of the lot so that we can see what the frontage was when it was initially approved versus what it is today.
There is, I believe.
And I might have missed it. Oh, thank you, Georgie. Okay, I see it. I missed it. Thank you.
Several plats.
Okay.
it was in the large one.
Okay,
And then these were the sizes.
thank you.
I'd also like to comment.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'm so sorry. I apologize. I do not have the name of the attorney written down, but and I just wanted to clarify that one of the statements that the attorney representing the developer is stated that we're not required to approve the vacate of the stub of Riley Street. And that's actually part of the request is at this time that we, when they are prepared to extend Jackson Street into that property, that we are willing to vacate the east stub of Riley Street. So that is something that is in our request to look at tonight. for the future development.
That's correct. A street vacation also requires the concurrence of the city council by state law. So it is something where if we wanted to do it, we would have to come back with an application at that time. We would ideally like to say in 2024, the planning commission didn't have a big problem with that. Or if in fact the evacuation route is an issue, we would say that, or if it's a big issue, we probably wouldn't come back and ask. But yes, it's not, we are not asking you to recommend Riley Street today. But that is not part
No,
of it.
but we are being asked to document that future development of the extension of Jackson Street, that we are stating that when that occurs, that we are willing. So we do need to make that.
Yes.
Am I misunderstanding, Mary? I just want to make sure I'm not understanding that I am, because he's saying that we're not actually, tonight would need to be a documentation on whether or not we approve to vacate the east stub of Riley Street, conditionally with the extension of the growth onto Jackson.
That is correct. If you want to say we are maybe asking for an opinion or a recommendation, but this proceeding, however long or short it may go and however many stages, does not result in vacating Riley Street.
Not until the future development, but the request is being asked of us tonight to make that approval that we will vacate Riley Street upon that construction. Is that correct? Okay.
And understanding that you cannot be in the planning commission, but although you may say so, you cannot bind a future city council to agree that Riley Street should be vacated. There still is a city council part of the process.
I'm definitely not saying that I'm not making that decision or saying that we make that decision, but to make the recommendation to city council. The request is coming through today that we send a request to city council along with the other 3 items on the list that we document that we would like to make a recommendation to vacate Riley Street at that time. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
That's neat. With all the map references, I see on it's sheet 3 of 6 of the large maps we were given, and I'm noticing tract A common area that was mentioned that is part of the density formula, I believe, and it's distributed. The tract A common area. And see that existing tract A White Dove Estate. Is that separate from this, the White Dove Estates tract A? Because if it says tract A common area, has that already been covered by the existing residential tract A? It's built. If you said that the second phase 2, 3, common areas being used as part of the formula for each lot, that the open space is being reflected in this tract A common area. Has it already been used from what's been built in phase 1, or is it new, even though it's called tract A, tract A?
If I follow your question correctly, I think the answer is first is that on your map where it shows a tract A in White Dove Estates, that has nothing whatever to do with this project. It doesn't figure into the name of this project. It's not part of this project.
Okay.
That represents open space that the developer of White Dove Estates had to provide. We are providing open space in tract A, tract B, tract D, some additional dedication out of tract F, which is being subdivided. And that open space taken as whole satisfies the requirement for open space inside the dotted line. It has zero relation to the open space inside the White Dove Estates.
Okay, thank you. That was my concern, and I don't see the other. I see A, E, F, then I saw G on the other. So anyway, I'm also not understanding the naming, and it's.
I think the map you're looking at may not include lots that are in phase one, because one of the lettered tracks is where the culvert runs underneath Big Buck Drive. One of them is north, if you will, in with the lots that are off of Song Street. And so they simply may be off of the map that you were looking at, because they were in the original subdivision.
This is the new.
Any other questions? Okay. Well, we can now receive public testimony. Begin.
We recommend a short 5-minute recess.
Great, thanks.
2.5 hours here.
Thank you. Reconvene at 7:30.
Actually, I'm trying to find them. 7:30. We have 10.
The recording has stopped.
Actually, your feet aren't tiny.
No. And,
Awesome.
and I was reading that.
Yes, it's and they're always tedious, you know, they.
No, like,
Feel like that?
what?
And the more you have, it goes down quickly if you have. That's not like. Like it's all good.
He's an expert.
Yeah. Pretty was over.
It's all downhill from there.
Yeah.
Like my color coded maps.
Oh, yeah,
I couldn't
that's nice.
figure it out, so I just colored it. Got out my colored pencils.
Black and white just doesn't communicate that way.
Did you?
But it helps. It really helps pulling one down on that big long document. Put down and show you.
I just think I suppose that's so. You printed off the original.
That was smart. Yeah, no, that makes a difference.
I'm grateful that I have this full table to myself. I'm not happy with my choices of nourishment prior to coming to it. Ice cream sundae with well, just maybe lack of food prior to arrival.
You know, this man has great artistic.
Just the one problem with the 5 o'clock time. I should have had a snack.
I was telling Dad about it too. He's pretty interested in pulling my dad out of the house. I was, yeah, he has some wood carving tools. He just doesn't know how to use them. And he said it'd be kind of cool to have somebody show me how to do it on a little thing.
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, it looked like you guys were having fun.
And it's a very small group. It's not intimidating or anything. It's just a small group.
Yeah.
But we consistently do it and
Yeah.
we love it. You know, it's our thing, you know, some people like axe throwing, some people like eating fentanyl, you know.
Not into that. And I got to meet his wife for the first time today.
Yeah.
She was volunteer of the year, and she was the first one that chose not to ride in the parade. I did not realize there was a precedent. I wish I would have known. I'm not surprised.
I could have written number 2 on the side of your toe.
Oh, yeah.
All these people that I get testimony.
A lot of them have already done riding.
Yeah, they're only here when they're a man.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to. Oh, that's good.
Luke's on, he's got his. My feet are so small right now, like, okay, so that.
I can't say I don't know.
That's okay. I'm so glad.
Have you had a bad cold?
Oh, yeah, I've been for like 3 weeks.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
Like you've had a bad cold for.
You don't want to leave the office.
Oh, it's been awful. And we had a fever on and off for 2.5 weeks.
Yesterday off, I noticed when I responded 2 seconds later to an email, I was CC'd on.
I was in the office. No, I stayed till 4-ish. Yeah. I have to catch up. Last week, I was in bed from Wednesday night after the cup.
Well, sorry, I thought you'd appreciate a little.
Just hold the lever in my hand, but welcome to now.
Be prepared, when you have little ones in the house, that happens.
Yeah.
I mean, we're gonna have to hold the rack.
So, yeah, let's make a motion.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't have to.
Okay, I can do, you'll let me, you don't feel,
And then I can fold.
and then you can make the version too. Yeah. How's that? There's so many kids over there, it's incredible.
I ordered, I was actually married.
I was left City Hall today. I was just shocked at how many kids were there. I should have taken.
We were, it's already been requested of us, so I mean, but we need to let these poor people do
I
their.
really need to see.
Get them to go by.
I can hear it out my window. Office all day long.
I hope everyone's like my mom with the plans next. She doesn't like living on real. There's no choice. I have 2 other events. And one of them, I'm nervous. I mean, I can, I just have, I still want to hear me. I have a meeting. Everybody go have fun. I'll just come here.
I ate a big one.
It's just fun. Yeah, I mean, it's super.
Talked to him about Anchor Street.
Did you? Okay.
And told him that the lady that helped design the post office and bought a bunch of plants and donated like 300 plants this weekend.
I agree, we have to hear everybody.
But if this doesn't have the money to,
Oddly enough, last night we were invited out to the folks house and they did ribs and they were out of this world. It's something we never have at home.
that nice.
It'd be nice to have it. Oh, man. Let's see. Finally, he was gonna.
Site visit landscaper.
Structure everything.
He did say he had contacted a land so I let him know that Rachel volunteered to do a design and
I realized
for the PPP.
and
He asked me,
What did he do?
heads of the importance. And you guys start going on about those. Really, the maps.
That confused me. I'm starting to get it, but not.
It's something with things that.
Yeah.
Dan's very about making it.
I know, well, you heard my first question. Yeah.
Let somebody else
You know what? I think.
understand that.
Yeah.
I think some of the things he's saying, I don't. But we don't have to approve any.
All right?
Yeah, I'm just gonna throw in, probably shouldn't talk about it now.
Is that Adam Song sitting out there? Do I know who she is? I know the name, but she's
It'll be
been
interesting.
around for a long time.
Look, I mean, it doesn't matter. We won't need to make a decision tonight.
So,
Sandra.
It's like this way, it was Starbucks. That will, but you can develop in a club.
They kicked me out. Starbucks here closes at 6:30. They kicked me out.
Oh, Starbucks kicked her out.
I know, but and then it just kind of worked out because my laptop was going to die, so I had to log in on my phone.
Oh my God.
Yeah, this is just a series of a.
They aren't making any.
I was like, "What do you mean you close at 6:30? It's the middle of the week."
Quite a few things with them
Yeah.
and your handwritings. awfully similar to mine.
Oh, no.
I should have been a doctor.
Because we're even joining, you know? Yeah, poor thing.
Yeah.
Do you find that it kept you from learning to spell?
Oh. You have really nice hand.
There's no sound.
She's just worried she lost us. Now you can hear us.
Thank you.
This meeting is being recorded.
We'll resume the City of Rockaway Beach Planning Commission meeting. And any other further questions from the commission? If that was public testimony in the application, I'll start by requesting if people would like to speak for the application itself. Unfortunately, the sign-up sheet did not have a for or against, so I'll just ask you if you are interested in making public testimony in support of this application, if you come forward and application notify the reporter if you're remote and want to raise the hand icon now, you can add that to the list. Would like to speak in favor of the application? Go ahead.
My name is Phil Howard. I'm at 10225 Meadow Loop Road in Florida. And I'm the original contractor for Amazon for that built the subdivision. And my original contract goes for the entire subdivision, same phase. So I'd just like to state that when you do a subdivision, you do it in phases. And the first phase is usually the grading phase, the mass grading phase. And that was completed, and along with 90% of the utility work was completed for the entire subdivision. And that included filling of the wetlands and some of the filling of the building. So she, as far as I know, and as far as I can prove, has completed that portion of her responsibility.
Questions? Thank you. Anyone else who would like to make testimony in favor of this application? So, people who have to give public testimony in opposition, wishing to be in opposition, can join us remotely by raising their hand. We're using the hand icon now, and we'll recognize you. Anyone remotely?
No.
No. So there's a speaker that'd like to speak against the application. The first come, first serve.
You can actually call their names.
Okay, I'll start with the names that are signed up here. Mark Magistrate.
Mark Magistrale. My address is 26531 Kitty Drive. Mailing address is P.O. Box 684, Rockaway Beach. I have several comments. Some of them have been addressed, and I'll steer away from those. But I'd like to respectfully challenge the notion that an approval is perpetual. A couple things have happened in 16 years, and even between 2006 and 2008, I'd like to challenge that notion. I understand you had some consultation or something, but good to see what opinion the community is around that. Appreciate that. I'd also So I echo the concerns of Mr. Webster, was it? Particularly around life and fire safety, evacuation issues, and that sort of thing. It's a huge issue. If you all know, that's a landlocked area completely. Also, I'm concerned that it's process-wise. As of yesterday, it seemed that excavation has already begun. Perhaps that's part of the approval, and that was allowed or something, but it feels a bit disingenuous here trying to comment and determine what to do about this. And it's already begun. So I think the process question, as I said, owned that home since 2006. Were it not for my neighbors, I wouldn't know this was even going on. So I take that back. I did receive a 114-page agenda yesterday or the day. But honestly, could not get through it all. My last concern would be a direct answer around, is there any development plan east of Kittiwake and north of Stone? And so if you look at the map, currently those are waiver designated wetland areas, not for development, but I'd like to have a firm answer. Is there going to be any development from Song north to Section 9 Road? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for your testimony. You're recognized as Tom Heckenberg.
I'm Tom Heckenberg. I live at 26767 Whitetail Avenue, which is not too far from this. So first of all, I'd like to, there's a written thing in here that we probably thought, but I'd like to address the tsunami hazard overlay, which is City of Rockaway Beach criteria section 3.142, which requires reduction standards established by the section intend to limit, direct, encourage the development of land uses when the area is subject to tsunami hazards in a manner that will A, reduce the loss of life, B, reduce damage to private and public property, C, reduce social, emotional, economic disruptions, D, increase the ability of the community to respond to recover. So as previously somebody stated that the tsunami evacuation route was just a thought, but in fact, it was established by the Nadana Beach Neighborhood Association in 2009. And they've gone through the neighborhood, they see that every intersection points in that area to that exit. You know, people take those tsunami evacuation signs, we get them replaced. I was working with the county to replace them. So it's been up for a long time. It's been established for a long time. And in fact, the Dugami maps, I don't know where he found that one, but most of the other ones do point outrightly as a tsunami evacuation route. This one in particular does say you could go south, but I don't know if you've ever tried that, but it's not possible. So there really is, one route out for about 100 or more houses in the Donna, and that's through Riley. That's if you go with the Dugami maps that say you can jog and you can make that in time. You take that away, and I don't know, these people that are, we have a lot of older people, they're not going to make it. And then I'd also like to propose that any additional houses that are or lots that are being proposed at this time opens up the opportunity to say, okay, well, let's make sure that tsunami route is acceptable and sufficient. So you're pre-approving additional lots at this time, and let's make sure that that tsunami evacuation route is sufficient. Furthermore, on the number 4, where they want to have you let go of that east end of Riley, and again, that is our route out. So you give that up, houses put there, we can't get out. That's all.
Thank you. And we have recognized Danny Wilhelmi.
So I'm Danny Wilhelmi, address is 26519 Chieftain Drive. I'd like to thank the commission for hearing me. A lot of the things I was going to say were covered, so I won't spend anyone's time. We're here pretty late. Probably the biggest thing that I have an issue with that we haven't talked about is, I looked at the memorandum in detail that came from the developer, and there's a section about, land inundation. So my house abuts right behind the creek, and which is referred to as tract A, the confusing tract A, tax lot 4500. That's been flooding pretty much since I've owned the house for 8 years. And what's interesting is there's a quote out of section 41 that talks about that land proposed for development subject to overflow, inundation, flood hazard, a collection of stormwaters, an adequate system of drains, levees, dikes, pumping systems shall be provided. The developer's response, documented in the memorandum sent to the city, says as part of developing phase 1, the applicant installed storm drain culverts from the wetland under Kittiwake Drive to tract B and thence to McMillan Creek to provide storm drainage. The applicant believes the existing wetland and drainage facility to be adequate. I submitted in my written comments to this committee that it's not adequate and it's not maintained. And you can see that it's clogging all the time. In fact, the city themselves are there nearly weekly trying to unplug the culverts so that Kittiwake Drive doesn't flood. Beyond that, I can tell you McMillan Creek is not nearly adequate to drain this area. And if you're putting these houses there, you're going to reduce natural drainage and you're going to force more to McMillan Creek. This winter, I have the most bank erosion that I've seen in 8 years, and nothing's being done about it. And nothing's being done because it's actually a private piece of property and my chieftain owns it. So basically the developer's draining onto somebody else's private property. Or if it's not private property, then we need to understand why it's being treated as private property. But there's a major stormwater drainage issue in this area. And it's obviously evidenced by the fact that now Jackson Street is effectively swamped. So I would like, for this, I understand development has to go forward. People want their houses. I wanted my beach dream. I got it. I get it. For this to go forward, there has to be a stormwater management plan. It's inadequate today and we're going to flood. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Ken Bragg.
Excuse me. My name is Ken Bragg. I live at 26543 Chieftain Drive, PO Box 1310. My biggest concern has pretty much been covered, but it has to do with the evacuation situation. There are essentially 2 evacuation areas or ways to get up to 101 from the White Dove Estates area. And one of them is at the end of Riley, and that one picks up pretty much everything within the northern portion of Donna Beach. And that's a lot of houses, and the passage as it exists is just barely adequate. If we add another 28 houses in there, and especially if we go and cut it off at the end of Riley, we've got a major problem. Most people who have any kind of a disability would not be able to get out, especially since there's only one road out, and that's clear at the other end of the Donna. So I believe that if we were to approve this PUD, it should be required to add a disability ADA, whatever you want to call it, access for people to escape the tsunami. You got 15 minutes after the earthquake, and there's no way that they're going to be able to clear the existing areas of Rockaway out in that area, the White Dove Estates, Kittiwake, in that 15-minute period with what we have today. And if we add another 28 houses or 20 houses,
especially if we add one at the end of Riley, it's going to be a major issue.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Gary Corbin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gary Corbin, Kitty-Wake Drive, 26642 Kitty-Wake. We owned that house for 12 years, and I guarantee you 12 years ago, there was a sign on Riley Street pointing to the evacuation route. And there's been a sign just about all the time that we've lived on Kitty-Wake Drive. For someone to come before you and say that that didn't exist and isn't true, they're not being truthful with you. And I have a big concern over the good faith nature or bad faith nature of the way this development is going forward. That's one of the areas that concerns me. A second example of that is the excavation work that began yesterday before this hearing even took place. That's bad faith. That's crazy. That's not respecting the process. It's not respecting the neighbors. And the third is this idea that, well, what's planned for Jackson Street is now a wetland, so we'll mitigate that. You don't just mitigate what nature is doing. That's called destroying. Jackson Street is now a wetland. They now have to comply with wetland regulations, and you don't just pave over that. Okay, there are nesting eagles in Tract A right now. There are beaver colonies in McMillan Creek. There are deer that came out onto Kitty-Wake Drive today because their habitat has now been plowed under. What are they going to do about that? Neighbors are upset, and we know development's going to happen, but we want it done in a good faith manner. Thank you.
Thank you. So Nancy, do you have any additional comments? Okay, Chair recognizes Nancy Webster.
Nancy Webster, my mailing address is P.O. Box 1291, Rockaway Beach. I live on Whitetail Avenue. And one issue I really want to discuss first is the egress from our neighborhood. And coincidentally, I was part of those 2008 hearings and attended them. And one of the issues that came out in the Headlight Herald in 2008 was the lack of egress for that neighborhood. And so the people looked at different ways, like out on the north side, and ODOT said no. They looked at trying to go through the wetlands, ODOT said no. And finally, ODOT said the only way to build an egress there, which would be required, is to do an overpass over 101. And that's where it was left in 2008. And I think that, and then there was something about fire, and that is only one exit for, 400 houses. This is crazy. And I guess Mr. Tydanian said, well, he could walk out. Well, most people aren't going to be able to walk out of that marsh area. And then my second question and concern is that we already have flooding in that area. And in 2015, when I lived there, there was major flooding, and it flooded David Street. McMillan Creek flooded all over. It flooded even across David. And people's septic tanks were flooded. There was flooding up to people's foundations, up to the, where the shakes began. And I think the more wetlands we fill, the more flooding we're going to have. And there need new culverts in that neighborhood. It's kind of a debate. Part of this is county and part of this is city. Those culverts have not been maintained. And in 2015, one of the neighbors went and talked to someone in the city that they contracted the culverts, and they wanted, this neighborhood even wanted to do those, but there wasn't agreement. So we have a neighborhood in the wetlands, and we're not. Then we're going to fill in more wetlands and build dense houses along McMillan Creek, and 15-foot buffer is not sufficient at all. This is a wildlife stream that goes into salmon habitat, and the lay 15 feet with big houses, this is destructive. So thank you.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Janet Tashima.
I think she left.
You left, okay, all right. Okay, so.
I wasn't sure I was going to want to say something, but after hearing everything, I want to say something.
Name and address?
Yes, my name is Delta Holderness. I live at 9340 Song Street in Rockaway. I walk those roads almost every single day. And for someone to say that because they're at the beach, they drive slower is crazy. They're wanting to get to the store faster. They're wanting to get to the beach faster. They want to get to wherever they're going faster. We had a kid hit in our neighborhood last summer. I don't know whatever happened to the kid. I think he had to be life flighted. I don't know if he survived. I walk my dog, my husband. I see neighbors all the time walking. We have to get out of the way. People don't slow down. In my comments that I gave you guys, I suggested putting in roadway markings that shows where walkers can be if we're not going to have sidewalks. I understand we don't have sidewalks, so maybe we don't do sidewalks in the 22 neighborhood area, but markings along the city streets would be nice. Speed limits in the city streets would be nice. There's no speed limits. I think these houses being going to be built on small lots are going to be more conducive to STRs, short-term rentals, than long-term residents, because there's not going to usually be a garage. So more short-term rentals means more cars. 3 or 4 or 5 or even 6 cars at one rental house is very common in our area. These STR people, they're not going to know that there are walkable exits out if there's a tsunami. They're going to get in their car and they're going to try and drive out of one entrance exit. So it is very dangerous there. One last thing I would like to say. I would encourage this commission to use the state law ORS 92.040 that Nancy Webster mentioned earlier, that requires subdivision applications that are more than 10 years old to be considered from the beginning. There are a lot of issues that need to be figured out, and I really think that the state law should prevail in this case. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your testimony. Okay, yeah, we'll go ahead. Come on up.
I'm Jerry Lislaw, 2555 Beach Drive, one of the founding members of the NDNA back in 2005 or so. A couple of things. The HBH report, when I looked at it, the key there, it seems to me, is that the Oregon Fire Code says if there's more than 30 properties being served only by one ingress egress point, and you exceed that number, you need to provide another ingress egress point. So, we've got more than 300 properties using one single in and out. If you don't deny this whole thing, this is 18 lots or 20, whatever it winds up to be. Where does it stop? There's precedent already in Rockaway for the area south of this that is 50 lots out. And planning commission required the creation of a new in and out street access point to 101 over the railroad tracks. That was a big victory for us, we thought, for all of Madonna Beach, because it's going to give us that an asset, a point where we have service from emergency vehicles or whatever, could have more than one choice to get in and out. So that hasn't happened yet, but if that development proceeds, that is a requirement. So if you let this go through without that, you could require the developer here to create an additional ingress egress tunnel. Not practical, doesn't have the frontage to even do that, but then it should be denied. Or wait until the other one is developed and piggyback onto that if there is availability in and out. So it seems pretty straightforward. You know, the area north of section line is a 50-acre piece. I've seen a subdivision map of that, 100 lots or whatever it is. We could dump that in there and we could all funnel out Beach Street. Not likely, I realized, but since the philanthropist that owned that was no longer the owner, was determined not to be. So that's a possibility now that somebody will develop that. And, but it just seems, disregarding that, to precedent for the area south of the subject property here.
Conclude your.
That you've already required the creation of a new point of access. So
We need to conclude your comments now. Okay. Thank you.
So thanks.
Thank you.
One more. I'll be very brief.
Okay.
Sue Sharp, 26767 White Dove, Rockaway Beach. Florida. Last summer, we were asked by the city of Rockaway to cut back our watering for our grasses. And we have a watershed that is compromised and we don't have a lot of water. And we're talking about, I understand there's the 20 houses and then there's additional houses. But again, looking at the whole request, the PUD, to put 20 more houses, which is probably 80 more people to use the water that we seem to be running.
Okay, thank you for your comments.
Can I do one more?
Okay.
My name is Frank Embry. I live at 26773 White Dove Avenue, Madonna Beach. And I'm a history guy. And this big mess that's going on here goes way back. It goes back to the big bankruptcy when White Dove was starting to build. Gary Dingus was running the operation. And he got into trouble with borrowing money from the Indian casino down the road down here. And it was the biggest bankruptcy in Tillamook County, $3 million, I think, or more than that, maybe. So after he went bankrupt, the properties were owned by White Dove Estates, which is all the properties that we're talking about now, were put on a list for at the Red Lion Hotel. They had an auction, and there were hundreds of properties. The list was this thick: Washington, Oregon, California. There were hundreds of properties that were auctioned off for nothing. And some people bought those properties. And I think probably Anna Song was one who picked up a property for $30,000, made a bunch of lots out of it, and went on with this project.
But you guys right here have a hell of a job. You're cleaning up the mess been going on here for 15 years. Thank you, and I hope you can do a good job.
That's fine. And we're going to close the discussion for public comments. Any questions the commissioners have for? Okay, so
applicant rebuttal.
Yeah, any rebuttal from the developer?
Even a lawyer can sometimes keep minutes. And again, we have the applicant. I think the main issue we heard in the comments is access. Yeah, it would be nice to have a second access. That requires things that Mrs. Son doesn't control. It requires ODOT, it requires the railroad. It is simply an impossible condition to put on any single project, but a dedicated access unless the railroad is part of the application. Great idea. It can't be done. And most importantly, it simply isn't tied to any of the criteria that apply to this particular application. On the criteria that apply to this application, we will submit the additional information about wetlands and so forth to demonstrate that we have met the criteria. I believe Mrs. Song paid a lot more than $30,000 for the property. So, thank you.
Okay. Have any final comments?
Nothing additional.
Okay.
Yeah, Commissioner number 15, Commissioner questions.
Yeah,
That's next.
any questions for the commission to applicants, staff, or public regarding the application?
What was the statement?
Yeah, questions for the applicants, the staff, or the public regarding the application?
Question for staff.
Right.
The Oregon statute 92 something that has been cited by Nancy Webster and another speaker. I understand that applies to subdivision plats. Does that also apply to PUDs?
So we did discuss that ORS with our attorneys, and given the case law that supported that ORS, there was nothing to say that a subdivision could be denied after a 10-year period unless it was specifically called out in your code. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. So unless waived by the applicants, the city shall allow the applicants at least 7 days to submit final written arguments, but no new evidence, facts, documents, or testimony in support of the application. Would the applicants like to submit additional written arguments within the next 7 days, or do you waive that right?
Mr. Chairman, I believe that both we and requested that the record be held with. Okay. He certainly do want to see the petition. Okay. Respond in accordance with the state law.
Okay, so we'll hold that. Okay. So we have the choices for a motion to close the record in public hearing, although the 7 days has already been agreed to. I'll accept the motion to continue the public hearing to a specific date and time, at least 7 days from now. Or accept the motion to close the public hearing and keep the record open for at least 7 days for additional written arguments. Motion?
I move to continue the public hearing to 5 p.m. on June 27th, 2004.
Second?
I will.
Okay.
I heard the request that time, so I will second that one.
We moved and seconded that we continue the request for additional written arguments. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
It's been unanimously
Get Sandra's vote.
Oh, Sandra, did you vote yes?
I did. However, are there no further commissioner discussion?
Not tonight.
No.
The motion was to continue the public hearing So it'd be continued to June 27th and discussion would be held after that.
Okay. So whatever questions I had earlier for staff would need to wait until the next hearing?
Yes, that would work.
Okay.
Okay. All right, since we're going to close the public hearing, keep the record, it's been voted, so we will close the public with.
There was a motion to continue the hearing.
Oh, tonight?
Not tonight.
No, to the 27th.
27th, yeah.
So it is going to be continuing to open, so we're not really closing.
No.
Okay. Okay, with that, I think we can close our discussion today. Thanks, everybody.
Last minute. Does that mean we can go home?
No old business and no new business have been discussed. And the planning commission comments or still in session.
We're still in session.
Let's all go run out there.
Meeting is still in session. I expect you all to either stay quiet or thank you.
Thank you.
Planning commission comments and concerns. We'll start with Stephanie.
I have a question. Since we have to continue next week, can we do this agenda item next week or no? That comments and concerns, would we have an opportunity to do that next week or no?
Another opportunity or
may I postpone my opportunity until we have to meet again next week is my question.
Yes.
Okay, then I have none tonight.
And Georgianne?
No, won't be here for the Anchor Street, but it sure looks fun.
And Nancy?
Look forward to next week. And I think we should all be mindful, general comments that have nothing to do with this proposal that we as a commission and City of Rockaway Beach need to address and be thoughtful of for future actions.
I have no joys or concerns.
And Sandra?
No, not tonight. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. One comment is I visited the Anchor Street several times and I got to play with the kids over there. That is an incredible place. State of the art. People can be very proud of what we've done, put that together. And everybody is definitely enjoying it. And I am going to commend Public Works for getting the stripes on the road and one-way sign, which was very concerned that when you exit, there was nothing on that telephone pole. Today there is. It's just one way. And that's something that everybody will forget when they leave the parking. So thanks to Dan for that. So I'll entertain a motion to close this.
I'll make a motion. We close tonight's meeting.
And the second?
I
Oh, thank you.
Didn't let Sandra talk.
I don't have any comments.
Okay. Okay. And so we moved in second. All in favor, say aye to close the meeting.
Aye.
Before I ask, sorry, clarification on who made the second, please.
It was Georgianne.
Thank you.
It's unanimously considered that the motion be carried. We're closing the meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for